We'd like to welcome everyone out to the Highland City Council work session on Tuesday, April 12th. It is 7:07 p.m. As part of the work session, there will be no votes on decisions made, and there will be no public hearings. But as we begin our meeting, as we put out an agenda, we have a distinguished guest here tonight. We'd like to, our first item will be a UDOT. We have a person here from the Utah Department of Transportation to discuss about the intersection of 4800 West and SR 92. If we could invite Eric Rasband with UDOT to come up. Just so you're aware, Eric is the manager over Region 3, so he is our expert. Is it Region 2?
Region 3, but you gave me a big promotion.
It might come with a raise. Go tell your boss.
I'm a planning manager for the region. So yeah.
Eric, welcome. Thank you for taking your time to come.
You bet. So UDOT Region 3 basically covers the central part of the state: Utah County, Wasatch County, Duchesne County, Uinta and Daggett counties, as well as Juab County. We appreciate the opportunity to come and visit with you. We understand this is not a new topic, and we've been asked to come in and visit with the council a little bit about this. This is part of a study that was actually initiated by the cities of Alpine and Highland through Mountain Land Association of Governments, and UDOT partnership with those agencies, including and also Lehigh City, to look at access to and from and around the Timpanogos Highway. The study looked at access points to and from, circulation, alternative routes, as well as how the express lane, the commuter lanes are working along the corridor, and looking for some emergency exit points, and because of some crashes that have historically happened there and locked people in. And that was at the request of the mayors at the time for both Alpine Highland, Cedar Hills, American Fork City, and Lehigh City mayors all came and visited with us and asked for us to do that work.
Would you mind just making sure the mic's just a little bit closer? We have some online.
I speak very lightly, so thank you for that. So this, like I said, this has been a study that we've actually been doing this study for over a couple of years. We started it right before COVID took us into lockdown. And it created some challenges for us because, as everybody knows, we all went into working from our homes, and so gathering traffic data was a challenge for us. We have some historical data that we used, and then we really put the study on hold until we could collect some better data after people had returned to work. So, Erin, can you go ahead and progress down to several slides down? I'm not going to go through the study because I believe you've had kind of an overview, and I wanted to really focus in on the North County Boulevard on Timpanogos Highway 4800 West intersection, because that's where a lot of the conversations have been. Working with staff and with the mayor, we went through and made some adjustments to the traffic signals. Our timing team observed some interesting behavior. So the intersection runs in what we call free, where it runs just on the sensors at the intersection, and it senses the vehicles at the intersection. The south leg, or the southbound approach, or the north leg of the intersection, currently backs up quite a ways, primarily in the morning, but we do see periods of time throughout the day where there are some additional times. So we set up some time of day timing plans, and as we were out there observing traffic, there's a phenomenon of people becoming distracted. We don't know if they're looking at their cell phones, they're playing with the radios, but as vehicles get in the queue, we plan for 2 to 4 seconds between vehicles. Doesn't sound like a lot of time, but you add it up over a minute, and that puts a lot of cars through the intersection. And what we're seeing is, with as few as the third car from the stop bar to maybe the 15th car back, people are distracted and they don't see the vehicles ahead of them moving. So we made some fairly aggressive timing changes for that movement, but we're not seeing the benefit because people are distracted, primarily with their cell phones or other things that are going on in the vehicle. And so what happens is, because the signal sees that gap between vehicles of greater than 4 seconds, it terminates, goes to yellow, and then it goes to red, and then it goes to the other movements. And so it could be we only get 3 cars through on a green, or we could get 20 cars through on the green. And during those peak travel times, you can imagine if you're only getting 3 to 6 cars through on a green, that queue continues to build up. And so that's just a driver behavior.
And so that happens when it's on free flow. If someone's on their phone and people start moving, also they go, oh, I got to quit my text, and there's a 4-second gap, it could trigger that light to turn yellow, then red.
Yeah, it doesn't, the signal would not see the car there present, or a stream of cars. So rather than extending to the 60 seconds that we have available during those peak travel times, so a minute is what we programmed for that southbound movement. Sometimes we're only getting 10 or 15 seconds.
Quick question.
Yeah.
If that's okay, right here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Is there a way to change the parameters in the software? Is it software driven?
It is, yep, it is.
So is there a way to change the parameters so it would go off time of day as opposed to gaps?
Yep, so what we do is we set it up with different timing parameters depending on the traffic load. So we run this intersection. It's the last intersection in the overall, whether you're on SR92 or whether you're on North County Boulevard. It's the last intersection, and both movements are heavy. So we run it free, but we run different timing patterns depending on the time of day. So from 7 in the morning until 10 in the morning, we run this 60-second time that it would be allowed. And then the rest of the day, we run at 45 seconds for that.
But I guess what I mean is, could you, for example, program it to where, I'm just guessing, between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock, it's just a straight minute as opposed to a 45-second based upon gaps?
Yes, we could, but then the other movements of the intersection would be penalized because of that. That's what we would call a max recall, or it goes to the max time. And the reason we run it off the detectors is it allows the signal to adjust to the traffic demand that exists.
But if you're indicating that it's not necessarily working,
that's a driver behavior issue. That's an enforcement issue. Distracted driving is an enforcement issue.
okay.
So with your timing right now, is it still, as we speak today, is it still free flowing, waiting to see if there's a car there in 4 seconds? It's not like Councilmember Ball's talking about where you've turned it to a certain time just to let it go.
Yeah, because realize that that's one leg at the intersection. We've got 3 other legs, and we've got to serve them as well and provide minimal impacts to them as much as we can. So it's a balance. It's a traffic signal timing doesn't make anybody happy all the time, and it's the way that it's one of the challenges that we have as we do signal timing.
When you've seen other areas that have some distractive, I mean, I imagine because they're so far back up, they're moving slower, so they're thinking that they're just kind of stop and going, so they're on their phones or they're kind of multitasking. Yeah. Have you seen other areas, and has there been anything else you've done to be able to help? We
try to work closely with the public safety officers in the area to enforce distracted driving behavior. And we see education and enforcement as one of the key tools in our toolbox. So if we, and certainly we would encourage, rather than ticketing, an education campaign. And that's something public safety officers have done in cooperation with us throughout the state.
So when you've noticed this distracted driving, is that at physical looking, or is it just saying, hey, we know it's busy and we only got 4 cars through, so we know there was some anomaly that happened? Or is it visual, or is it
typically we're watching and seeing our visual observations. If I would imagine if we had one of your public safety officers here, they could probably give you a clear indication. They can see who's looking at a cell phone or their radio and not focusing on driving. Certainly, I've seen it.
But we're just talking, this is not nothing about safety. This is specifically about the light timing and how many cars get through.
Yeah, it is. So this is just how efficient the cars are able to get through the intersection. It doesn't address anything other than we're trying to make adjustments to make it easier for cars to get through the intersection. Correct.
So you can't do, like, once again, you couldn't say 30 seconds on, or 35 seconds on south, 45 seconds going east, 45 seconds coming from the south. You don't do lights that way to try to get them.
We can, and we can do that. It's just if you don't have the demand, so for instance, on the east leg of the intersection, there's not a high vehicle demand. So if we program 25 seconds in on that, and there wasn't enough vehicles to keep that green time for that 25 seconds, you've got 5, 10, 15 seconds of additional unused green time. So what we try to do is maximize our green time around the intersection.
I'd like to ask a question.
Please.
So you were talking about you use law enforcement to educate, not particularly ticket people. A lot of those people early in the morning are young drivers.
Agreed.
And they're all have umbilical cords to their cell phones. I'm not sure, how do you go about educating people to not do that? Do you have a police officer at the corner? How do you go about educating people? It's easy to say let's educate them, but what do you recommend? What's been used in the past?
So we spend a lot of money on education. We have a lot of radio ads. We use our overhead variable message signs to talk about distracted driving. It's our number one challenge from a safety perspective. Forget about operations. Distracted driving is the number one killer that we have on our roads today. And so we spend a lot of money focused on trying to educate folks about distracted driving. We go to driver's ed classes at the high schools. We educate them. I was out at the Country Club intersection on North County Boulevard several times this week, and I absolutely observed exactly what you're describing. Young drivers driving very aggressively, trying to get to school. And I'm not sure that they needed to. I don't know what time the classes started at Lone Peak, but at 7:25 in the morning, there was an increase in traffic, a significant increase in traffic on North County Boulevard. And as I watched that, the most aggressive drivers were the young drivers. I'm guilty of that when I was a teenager. I had a great fast car. I like to drive fast. I like to show off for my friends. I made a lot of stupid mistakes. I was very lucky. And that's what we need to continue working with our youth to educate them the risks of distracted driving.
So, again, we need to do that, but I'm not quite sure how we do that. Do we have a flashing sign up there? We can go to the school, and I've been an advocate. I think we need to meet with the principal and limit the number of people that are permitted to drive to school, and some other things. But we can do education at the school, but do you recommend signage or a flashing sign or the police officers being there?
Police officers is what we've seen, and actually pulling people over. And like I said, I would recommend education. If you have repeat offenders, then of course it steps up in what happens.
So Eric,
okay.
And there was a proposal about 6 weeks ago about having 2 lanes going south. The issue you're talking about, does it matter if it's 1 or 2 lanes for the distracted driver? It just now means you're going to have 2 distracted drivers in 2 different lanes. Does that make sense? Does that make it less safe because now you have 2 lanes with distracted drivers?
I wouldn't say so. That's a loaded question.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
When I go to operations, this gap out issue where the signal sees the 4 seconds between vehicles, if you have 2 vehicles in adjacent lanes, the likelihood of that gap out condition is less because your detector zone is filled up with 2 vehicles, and you start to fill up that gap area. And so from an operations standpoint, that helps. Distracted driving is just a bad issue from a safety perspective across the board. Yep.
I have some questions for you. I just want to get down to you're the one who has experience in this. You've looked at all the data. You've analyzed it, and so we had a lot of feedback from our residents when this issue was brought up. I want to know from your perspective, is this a public safety issue? What will happen if we don't take care of this issue? And also, my third question is, we actually had somebody who was a former UDOT employee who came and said this road does not need to be widened, that we should actually be looking at Alpine Highway. So I want to know your views on that as well.
I know the individual. He worked for us almost a decade ago as an intern, on a training program. I understand I was not in the meeting. I only have the information that was relayed to me. I understand he took responsibility for making these types of decisions. He worked for us for 2 to 4 years in a training program. He didn't have the experience. He's now, my understanding is he has now gone into structural engineering, which is a different discipline. He's a smart individual. Like I said, I've worked with him. I know who he is. He's very smart. I disagree with his observations. North County Boulevard is a 5-lane road. It's the east side belt route for northeast Utah County. It feeds this road. Alpine Highway is a 3-lane road that goes into the center of American Fork and doesn't have great freeway access. And we're looking 50 years out, or not 50, we're looking out to year 2050 as part of this study, trying to make some decisions. So if you want to go to the next slide, I can answer some of the safety questions. And Mayor Ostler asked these questions. He says, how unsafe is this intersection? So we asked our Central Traffic and Safety Office to look at data. Out of 10,000 intersections in the state of Utah, this intersection is the 152nd. So it's not our worst, but it's up there. In Utah County, it's the 20th highest crash location. Again, not our worst, but it's up there. And if there's an opportunity for us to correct it, there's a safety issue out there. From 2016 to March of 22, we pulled some crash data. 33 front to rears, 30 angles, 6 head-ons, 7 side swipes. And this graphic here, the lines are a little bit fat and show some of the issues. The red line is taking the striping on one side of the intersection and projecting it through the intersection. And then the yellow line is where the yellow stripe is. Our design standards would be to have no more than 1.5 foot offset through the intersection. For the northbound movement, we have a 10-foot offset through the intersection. For the southbound movement, we have a 4-foot offset through the intersection. Geometrically, that creates some challenges. The red little triangle in the middle is a pinch point that we have in the center of the intersection. That's directly related to the side swipe and the angle crashes that we show there. As you go through the intersection, so you're coming up to the intersection northbound, you've got 2 lanes that you're driving on North County Boulevard that you're approaching. One of those lanes turns into a left turn only lane, and the other lane is a through lane. And as you're going through the intersection, those vehicles that are going through the intersection have to move 10 feet over, and they do that in the middle of the intersection. And we have that pinch point where that red triangle is. And that's where a lot of the crashes are occurring, is that it's a geometric challenge. The mayor's asked us to look at signing and striping. Those are informational pieces, but they don't fix the underlying safety issues. Why is it this way? North County Boulevard was a county road, and it was built by Utah County. And then after they built the road, they turned the jurisdiction over to the Utah Department of Transportation. They did everything within their abilities with the budget that they had given to them to address North County Boulevard. And unfortunately, we have a safety challenge at this intersection with that offset through the intersection. So they're great partners. Alpine and Highland are great partners. It's just, we have a challenge. There's a lot of other needs. Our checkbook only goes so far. So that's the long and short of it. UDOT will add this to the Mountain Land Association of Government's Long-Range Transportation Plan, and as our funding becomes available, we will look to address this. if we don't take advantage of other funding sources.
So how would you suggest addressing it?
The intersection concept designs that were shown the last time is exactly what we spent $150,000 studying this intersection, and that was the recommendations from the professionals. We would do exactly what was recommended a couple of weeks ago.
So, now, Eric, I apologize, I'm asking some of the questions
You're
that I
good.
asked before, but I
You're
just
good.
want, so one of the, right now we have one lane going northbound. So I mean, we have two in the turn and one on the side. I see a lot of people that's in that turn, you want to say that the second on the outside, that also it doesn't go straight through, and so they try to bump over, and that was one of the reasons why the request for the signage above. But in the proposal that we saw, it had 2 lanes going northbound. Why can't we just get this alignment so it, it shows it's 10 feet off? We just get the alignment and we keep just 1 lane going northbound? Or is there a safety issue why you need 2 lanes going northbound, or?
I would not say it's a safety issue, it's an operational issue. It goes back to the signal timing challenges that we have. Like I said, we looked out to year 2050 and we tried to project the growth. We look at the land use that the cities have approved for both residential as well as business and commercial, and we try to look in the crystal ball and project how much growth is going to happen. And based on those numbers, we're showing that if we're going to make an investment in this intersection, and when we make an investment, we try to make a 20 to 30-year investment, and that is what the recommendation was, is to address the 2030 need. Or, I mean, sorry, the 2050 need. So it's a long-term investment, but it's so that when we spend our money, we spend it once, and then we don't have to come back and continue to put Band-Aids. We try to do that where we can. It's just like our own checkbooks at home. Sometimes our checkbooks won't take us that far, but we try to do what we can.
So what I just heard, if UDOT is going to do this intersection, they want to get it done one time and get it done right. They don't want to do 1 lane because they look at the traffic flow. They'd like to have 2 lanes going north. What about the 2 lanes going south? What's the need? Is it?
It's the same need. It's just different times of the day. We have tried to do the Band-Aid approach at this intersection. For instance, the southbound right turn movement. That was a small improvement that we put in at that location several years ago. That's bought us some time, but now we're back talking about it again. We put in the free right from eastbound to southbound. Again, that was a short-term fix, and we're back talking about the intersection.
So if we do put 2 lanes going south and 2 lanes going north, just looking at the intersection, what type of transitioning do we need to have both south or north? I mean, could we have 2, and how soon can they get over?
The goal would be to have the lanes aligned straight through the intersection with no more than 1.5 feet of offset between.
And how long do they have to go if you're saying go north or go south?
Operationally, we would like to go a minimum of 500, but in an ideal situation, we would go 1,500 feet beyond the intersection. There's an element that we call lane utilization. I'm certain you have seen it. When you come up to a left turn, a signal with 2 left turn lanes, and one of the lanes has a lot more cars in it than the other lane, it's because they're trying to get to a certain destination. It could be that the lanes are dropping just on the other side of the intersection. We see that often where we only have 300 feet of 2 lanes and then it drops.
as a council are struggling with is where we can make the transition if we need to have 2 lanes north and south at this intersection to make it safe. And the unfortunate thing is the citizens of Highland bear the brunt of most of this, whereas the citizens of another city have most of the benefit. Now, I mean, I use everybody else's roads too, but at the same time, you know, we're trying to find kind of that sweet spot where we can make a safe intersection but transition into a 3-lane road, which is what the citizens want. And the problem is I was here on the council when we built the 5-lane road at North County, and I watched the traffic double. And I don't know if there's statistics to prove that, but it sure seemed like it. So, you know, I'm always kind of in the philosophy, if you build it, they come. And I think we've seen that with the freeways. I mean, the freeway's always packed. Now it's 12 lanes. You know, what's your next step is UDOT? You know, you're going to put double deckers, they'll be packed too. So I don't know, I kind of struggle with this because we lose a lot of quality of life in the name of, you know, more efficiency and safety. So, you know, any suggestions you have on that, and you're talking about going up 1,500 feet, ideally, you know, most of us would kind of lean more to 750 or something because we'd want to take out people's homes and yards and all that stuff. So, you know, we appreciate your help, but it sure be nice to be able to find this sweet spot. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. We make compromises often, and is it needed for 5 lanes? I think that's a really nice to have, but is it needed? I think the things that you should consider, that 2-way left turn lane, that center lane, that provides a lot of safety for vehicles that are turning into and out of driveways. Basically gets them out of the through travel lane. If you've got a shoulder, it creates a place for vehicles to pull off into the shoulder. It also provides a place for bicyclists, which is huge in our state right now. And so providing some additional width for bicyclists to have an 8-foot shoulder or a 5-foot shoulder over no shoulder, it's a safety thing. I've been hit by a car on my bicycle, so I get very anxious about riding on the road anymore. And it's got to be a very good shoulder for me to get on it, or I go a dedicated path.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Please.
Fun fact, I don't know how to ride a bike, so that's not an issue for me.
You don't?
No, and I think I'm too old to learn, but my 9-year-old learned last week, so I feel like that's a win. Okay. If I...
Teacher?
No, no, it was not me. I thought I heard you say something about transitioning with the 2 lanes going northbound was more an issue of function rather than safety. So I think our residents, generally it seems like they're not super interested in function. I think they're interested in safety, but not as much function. So what would your plan be to maximize safety, but not necessarily maximize function?
Yep. So we do have enough demand that we need 2 left turn lanes going northbound to westbound. And I don't know that there's any disagreement with that. I think 1 through lane would be fine. And it would buy us a lot of time. The key is that curb line, as you're in that through lane today, that curb line is right in the center or left, almost in your driver's vision as you look straight through the intersection. I would prefer to see that curb line move to the east and the left turns on the opposite side to be moved to the east as well, so that you have a 16-foot receiving lane going northbound through the intersection. The double yellow on the north leg aligns with the solid white stripe for that left turn lane. That allows those vehicles that are turning southbound left to see oncoming traffic without vehicles hiding the oncoming through traffic. And then to make sure that you've got the southbound lane aligned with the southbound receiving lane, you would need to add 12 feet of striped out lane. So you've got the 2 left turn lanes. On the other side, you've got 1 southbound and then a striped out line so that your through lanes can align through the intersection.
And it's that you have a blanked out lane, so no one's in it, that marries up to the other side.
So we have those, the one that I can think of immediately is the one at Highland Boulevard at 92 going into Smith's. It's a single left turn, and then it's striped out with some chevrons. And that's built for future capacity. There's projections that at some point in the future we'll need 2 left turn lanes going into the Smith's area. So when we built that road, we invested 10 years ago for a 2040 horizon. And so we built the roadway width and then put in striping to preserve that long term.
So just coming up on what Councilmember Bill's talking about, you just mentioned something that I had not heard before. You're saying northbound having 1 lane, if we're for functionality, because we're trying to be sensitive. The council's already voted this proposal down and saying we want to have as minimal effect on our residents. So what you're stating is we can keep 1 lane going northbound. Are you stating that it's okay to have 1 lane going southbound, or is the recommendation to go double southbound?
It's one of those compromises. If it's what the residents want, we try to listen where we can to the residents. I do believe at the intersection some widening needs to happen to address the geometric challenges at the intersection.
And so looking at funding, I mean, because I'm going, okay, how do we get, if we have an unsafe intersection? Because when the very first thing, really when we talked, Eric, I'm going, tell me about the safety of this intersection. Share with us what we need to do to make this intersection safe. And I don't want to be the mayor saying, hey, look, someone just got hurt, we told you so. I want it resolved before someone gets hurt. I don't want that call.
I would like to focus on the geometric design of the intersection. The proposal that was submitted to MAG was about a $10 million proposal. If that was to move forward, do we need to spend that full $10 million? Maybe not. Maybe we do with today's inflation. It's a big question mark. Inflation's been a significant issue for us. But if the community, the city, the council, the residents don't want that 5 lanes through the intersection, let's spend some time doing some design work to see if we can correct the geometrics and get something that will get us sometime, buy us some safety.
So as we're looking, would that just be a UDOT project? Is that something that Mountain Land Association of Governments, I'm just saying for funding, where do we get the funding the fastest? Is it trying to work with Mountain Land Association of Governments saying, hey, part of your pool that you're going to be looking at, we've now, we're looking at a much smaller thing just for this intersection. Is it there, or is this a project that UDOT could take on from their funding? Yeah. How does that look?
There are multiple funding sources that would become available. The most immediate and easily to tap into is the funding through Mountain Land Association of Governments. They're currently evaluating projects right now. This is one of them that can be evaluated because it was submitted. To qualify for that need to be on the long-range transportation plan. We just finished this study. The next update to the transportation plan will be published in year 2023. We anticipate getting these intersections, this is one of 3 intersections that we identified in this study, included in the transportation plan. Once it's included in the transportation plan, the MAG transportation plan, it can start to compete for that highway improvement program funding. We are currently programmed out to year 2030 with that funding source. The legislature just gave us another $700 million that the Transportation Commission is currently programming. The direction that the legislature gave us is to take that program that we've programmed out to 2030 and fast track as many projects as we can with that funding source. We have a handful of projects that are ready to go, and the commission will meet later this month to determine which projects we'll be able to, and then with the remaining funding to go ahead and fund projects on a regional basis. And so they want the remaining funding to be spread throughout the state. Those dollars can be big. If you think about the I-15 core reconstruction or the SR-92 reconstruction that was a decade ago, that was funded out of that program. The I-15 core project, I worked on that one as a $1.2 billion project. That was a decade ago. Today, it'd probably be a $2 or $3 billion project. That's another issue that we're dealing with is inflation. Everybody, they came out with the CPI numbers today. Our, real estate, 25 to 30% year over year. So when we have to acquire property, automatically prices jump 25 to 30%. The construction projects, the materials, paying people, the fuel to run the equipment, we're seeing anywhere from 8 to 15% price increase. So our projects year over year are growing by 40 to 50% in cost. We can't keep up. And so when I talk about the funding sources that we currently have, we're getting much less buying power.
So as we're looking at this intersection, how would the property be affected by the property ownership? I mean, are we saying that to redo that intersection, would you have to still acquire some property there? And how far back? Is it just those two property owners on the corner, or are you going to have to go up a little bit? I mean, what impact would this be to our residents?
The corner properties are at risk. And that's one of the hardest things that we do as an agency is go to talk to people about their property. We're fair. We pay fair market value. And if the property owner doesn't agree, they have the opportunity to bring in their own appraiser. And then we generally meet in the middle. One of the other things that we do is we pay relocation costs. And in today's real estate market, those relocation costs are astronomical. I just got some estimates today. We're paying in the range of $150,000 to $175,000 to allow people to relocate because there's no inventory. They have to be competitive to bid on projects, so they have to bid $50,000 to $100,000 over asking. And the state of Utah realizes that there's no inventory and that people need to be made whole.
Well, as we look at our original plan, we weren't taking any of the homes out. I mean, if you're talking about your alignment where you got to shift 10 feet, are you saying maybe we need to go 10 feet over into the one property? Any property we take from residents is a concern. But I'm just going, this seems to be less impactful than what was being talked about 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, we would, if we got funding, we would hire some designers, and the designers that we work with are focused on minimizing those impacts.
Can I make a little comment? UDOT built a road, Canal Boulevard, you're probably pretty familiar with it, which went through the south end of my HOA, and you took some of our park. And I have to compliment you. UDOT was very, very fair.
That's great.
And so I think they are always fair with the residents. I find they've been fairer than other government organizations, so we appreciate that.
First, we would start with the design. And we would work there's design elements that we would like to get, and we would work to get those elements, but also looking at how we can minimize the impacts to the adjacent property owners. We're not always able to not have impacts. And when we get into those, we try to work with the property owners.
What would, as a city council, I mean, is this a project you just go on your own? You need, because on the other one, we had to do a change to our transportation plan to show it on our, what you're speaking, you're talking about what, as a council, would we need to do to help UDOT? Is it something we'd have to do at all, or just it's a UDOT project, or?
It just depends on what funding source you go after. If you wanted to take advantage of the existing MAG, Mountain Land Association of Governments funding sources, then I think it would need to be incorporated into your plan. I think that's one of the requirements that they have. For us, we have to have it on the MAG plan. MAG does the planning, the long-range planning for the urbanized area. So we have to get it on the MAG plan before we can consider it for funding. And so that's the option, is you got to start by getting it on a plan. Once it's on a plan, then you can start compete for funding. If you move forward with the MAG funding and put it on the plan, then that funding could be available in 2024. If you waited for UDOT, it could be beyond 2030, just looking at where the current resources are available for us. But
Any other questions for Eric or clarification, or?
thank you.
Nathan, do you have anything you thought we haven't asked that needs to be asked? I think you've been very helpful, and I think as a council, you've given us some, input that we maybe had not known about. Like I said, if it's only about safety, you're saying we can keep with just the one lane going north and one lane going south as safety. The main thing is trying to adjust the lanes going so they marry up as for the safety issue.
Yeah. And that's a compromise, but that's the feedback that the community's given us, right?
Yeah.
And we try to listen. We really do try to listen to the community. At the end of the day, we all work for our citizens. And we take that stewardship.
I appreciate you
Yeah.
bringing up the distracted driving thing, because I think a lot of that underlies some of our big problems here.
Yeah. It was difficult to watch. It was yesterday morning. I watched the traffic out there at Clubhouse, and it was disconcerting to see what I saw. So, and I've been doing this for almost 30 years now.
Was that area heavier in distracted drivers than in other areas?
Aggressive driving.
Aggressive driving?
Very aggressive driving.
We need to
behavior.
do some
Yeah.
education at the high school.
Yep. So,
That's good to know, too.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Andy has our number. The mayor has our number. Please, anytime. We're willing to come and visit.
Eric, thank you. I mean, it wasn't just
Thank
tonight.
you.
He came and spent some time with us earlier as we were trying to understand the safety concerns. So I really appreciate it, Eric. You've been a great partner there, so thank you.
Just let
Thank
us
you.
know.
Can I, I'm sorry, I always come up with a question after. Is it not possible to do the shifting of the lanes on the south side instead of on the north side?
Could be.
Where there's more, because you're not taking out homes there or interfering in homes, really?
It could be, and that's where if we wanted to move forward, get a designer to start looking at what the constraints are and see what we can do. I would suggest there's so much width on the south side, you've got to make up for some of that width on the north side. But there's opportunities to minimize impacts.
I do have a quick question.
Yes.
It's okay. I don't know if you've been to Seattle before, but they have the ability to change the direction of traffic according to morning rush hour and evening rush hour. Would that be an impractical solution? Would that require more technology than we have, or?
We operate that on 5400 South in Salt Lake City and Taylorsville, basically from I-215 out to beyond Bangerter Highway. Actually, it's from Redwood Road out to Bangerter Highway. That system is automated. It's overhead signs that automatically change. It does require a lot of technology. The other thing that type of technology needs is a directional split. What I mean by directional split is in the morning, for something like that to be successful, you'd like to see 65 to 75% of your traffic going in one direction, typically away from the residential area to the business areas, and then in the evening the opposite. I don't know what the directional splits are here, but that's something that could be evaluated.
You think that'd be overkill for an intersection of this size and for the amount of traffic?
For an intersection, those types of systems are typically for long segments of roadway, not intersections. So
Okay.
from at the intersection, I actually think a system like that would create more safety challenges for us.
Okay, thank you.
That was one of the issues we dealt with on 5400 South, was the technology and people learning what those overhead signs meant. When we first turned that system on, we had some safety challenges and crash numbers that we didn't like, and we had to make some adjustments to that. So,
Okay,
yep.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Is there, so Nathan was gone. I wasn't sure what we need to do, if it's something that, we need to bring up at a council meeting at a later time about what we want to do here, if there's some direction. Andy, you went and did with MAG, Association of Governments, I think they had sites where they went and visited yesterday. Is it something that if we're looking to try to do something tonight, and maybe, Nathan, now that you're back, what we're asking is that here at this intersection of what we've talked with Eric about, and we need to talk with MAG about saying, hey, this has changed what we thought, if the council is interested in trying to move forward. And maybe that's, I guess, what we got to, is there enough interest from the council to have some discussion with MAG of what we need to do? If we, is it the thought to try to keep just the one lanes going each direction, but we want to do something with this intersection, or is it something you want to be brought back up another time to discuss? At a later date, what would be the recommendation here? It's not a vote, it's just giving input.
Well, I'm never shy to give my opinion. I would really like to keep one lane going north and south, but I do think we need to look at the concerns that Mr. Rasband brought up in the intersection, where you have that offsetting that doesn't work, and you may have to, widen that intersection going up. I support looking at this, but I would prefer to keep one lane up north and south, okay. Yes. But, again, I think we need to meet with the principal and the school board about the traffic issues that are created by Lone Peak and their policies that promote it. And so I think this distracted driving thing is something we need to focus on as well. Now, that's my personal opinion.
Any other input?
Well, I'll agree with Scott as well. I mean, it needs to be re-looked at. I like how he said, it isn't a one design kind of thing, that they would bring in a designer, they'd see what is what can we do with the least impact to the residents. But absolutely, we need to go to the schools as
now,
well.
In order to get to the designer, we have to talk with MAG to see if this is something, is it, and Andy and Nathan, is it once it's MAG will put it on as an approved project, then they go to design? Is it once they have funding? When does it go to design?
So the process is the project, if it's selected for funding, then you go to your specific design, at the appropriate time. So MAG programs the money out, and they say, okay, yeah, you're likely to be funded in this year. And so, you start to look at a design probably somewhere in the year down the road or something like that, start to look at the design. But, it basically goes funding, design, right-of-way, construction.
And once it gets to design, can the council still have a lot of input and saying, hold it, you've designed this, but that was not what we envisioned? Does that make, or do we lose control?
No, you don't ever lose control. I mean, as far as, the decision-making bodies still have control. So, I mean, there will still be ample time to look in the future at, okay, what's the right design decision, but the big issue is that without knowing, in terms of a vote, without knowing that the city supports it, then MAG's can be hesitant to fund it until they know that, okay, we've got support for change at this intersection. Okay. But they basically follow that basic pattern. Okay, the project's funded. Now we'll look at the right specific design for the intersection, and then.
So really, what we need to kind of get a feedback is it something we want to have MAG look at as maybe funding, and then get it on their docket to even look at design of what we're talking. And then, like I said, we can bring it up at the so Nathan, is this something that has to come up as a public hearing or as a item on the agenda to make a decision? How is it done?
It would have to be an item on the agenda. It wouldn't necessarily be a public hearing because we're not doing a general plan amendment. We're just looking at potential intersection, cross-section.
Okay. So maybe the council could just let us, maybe it doesn't necessarily tonight, but I mean, if you wanted to say, hey, let's put it on the agenda to discuss, so then we can have an official vote if we want to move forward to MAG.
I would be really supportive of looking at this one lane, fix the intersection, address the safety, the least impact upon the residents. So I certainly would be supportive of looking at that.
I am supportive of addressing the safety issue much more than the functional issue. I think people are okay with the functional issue, and if we address the intersection issue for safety, I prefer to do as much of the adjustment as we can on the south side.
Okay.
So just one comment. I wanted to agree with Dr. Smith in that we can facilitate inappropriate behavior through costly structural modifications, or we can deal with modifying the behavior, which is a less expensive and a better solution. And I also agree with Brittany where we're not making those costly structural changes that interfere with quality of life, but rather dealing with the problem, which is the behavior, instead of accommodating the behavior by spending a lot of money.
And I totally agree with that too, but as a former high school teacher, I can tell you that behavior is going to only be changed in the home. It's not going to be changed at the city council, and it's not going to be changed at the school level. That is parents being willing to say, I'll drive you to school, I'll make you take the bus, whatever it is. So while I think it's a great suggestion, I think changing teenage behavior is really difficult.
Yeah, but when a $250 ticket shows up in the mailbox, then that behavior will be modified by parents who
Well, I think what Brittany
be
was
forced to pay
saying,
the ticket.
what Brittany was saying is if a certain dad, and I'm not going to say maybe I was his dad, has a daughter says, please get off your phone, that maybe that's the example that the parents were setting because they're on their own phone. I'm just saying, it's not just always teenagers. I've noticed, I always will be driving down the freeway and someone seems to be texting or something. I'm going, what are you doing? You're driving down the freeway texting. I mean, there's adults that do some of this behavior. I see what's happening there. You got stopped. You think you're there for a bit. They think they can respond to a fast text. And I think all of us are probably being guilty of it. But I'm just saying the safety issue of the 10-foot off and 4-foot is not distracted driving. It's really kind of backing it up a little bit.
Combination of things.
I see an opportunity for a great fundraiser here.
So anyway,
$150 tickets to everyone that does it will raise thousands of dollars, and we'll be able to fix the intersection
everyone will say
at no cost to the city.
And we can't put any in. So what we're hearing is maybe bring this at a different council meeting here next little bit to discuss this, to then what we would be discussing and say, hey, let's put this on to look to be able to tell Mountain Land Associated Government we would be interested in this type of intersection, seeking out funding, and we'll bring that at a different council time and notice it. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's great. I would like to add, though, because I know we have some residents here, that I would be super receptive to any email or feedback that you have now that you've kind of heard
Yes,
this
please.
presentation, please.
So hopefully that was helpful, following up a little bit from our last meeting. So with that, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and we'll put that on a future agenda. We'll now move on to our next item, which is the fiscal year 2022-2023 budget revenue projections, and I believe that is Tyler. Eric, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Drive carefully.
Stay away from distracted drivers.
In the snow,
thank you for those who
and the
came.
April snow.
So Tyler, this is you on the budget?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Great to be with you this evening, and hope you're staying warm as well as safe. This evening, we're kicking off discussions there of the budget development for fiscal year 2023, and particularly with focus to the revenue projections. As you know, the fiscal year runs beginning July 1 through June 30. So we're looking at fiscal year 23, which will begin July 1 of 2022. We're also here particularly focused on distinguishing between ongoing and one-time revenues. As discussed with the council in other settings, the Lone Peak Public Safety District is considering some increases there, and those would be ongoing costs. So we need to make sure that the revenue and expenses associated with that are all sustainable. We'll start off here with the general fund specifically, and that's where we'll discuss or focus most of our discussion this evening, we anticipate, and particularly with sales tax. On this chart in front of you, we have in yellow the sales tax revenues that were received each year through the first 7 months of the year, and that represents September through March of each year. And you can see that there's an upward trend each year in the first 7 months. That correlates with the total year sales tax revenues that you see also increasing year over year. The estimate that we've provided here for the current fiscal year 22 of almost $3.45 million is slightly higher than what the budget was amended to in January, and is based on the last 12 months. So looking back into the last 5 months of the prior fiscal year, and then the current, the first 7 months of the current fiscal year.
Tyler, can I ask a question?
You bet.
So 2 years ago, of course, we had the uncertainty about COVID, but we underestimated the sales tax by $500,000. Right? I mean, we got $500,000 more than what we thought we would in the budget. And last year, I think it was like $300 million more than we thought we'd get it. Do you feel comfortable with these? Are we over-projecting, under-projecting again? Because it's always kind of frustrating. I mean, you never can predict for sure about sales tax. Sure. We might go into a recession now, but it seems like we've been underestimating the last 2 or 3 years. And it's a little frustrating, especially if there's pressure to raise revenue and other resources. So what's your gut feeling? Is this it? Yeah.
I would speak in terms of ranges.
Right.
I think this is plus or minus 200 or 300 on either side. There's obviously 5 months left to go of the current fiscal year. If you look at the first 7 months of the year and annualize that total, that puts us right at that, actually right under the 3.6. So we're still looking towards an increase, even using just the last 7 months and factoring that over a 12-month period. To your point, and you asked a great question, Councilman. Over the last 5 years, when we look at the first 7 months compared to the full year, 12 months of each year, we're seeing that those trends stay generally fairly consistent. So if we see a 10% increase during the first 7 months, we're seeing an increase within 5% of that as well. So what we're showing here and what we're projecting for next year would be the 3.45 is a 6% increase over the amended budget. So that's the 3.3 the council approved in January. It was originally just over $3 million. And then fiscal year 23 would be another 4% increase after fiscal year 22. Certainly possible that comes in higher. And as you've noted, the impacts of COVID have trended significantly upward compared to where we thought we'd be 2 or 3 years ago when the pandemic began. It's not a matter of if, but when the economy will begin to right, and some of that increase will, not that we're necessarily saying that the revenue is going to decrease, but the rate of increase could slow. And we're seeing the Federal Reserve has all but promised a number of increases coming down the pike. So those are things that we're keeping in mind as we're somewhat conservative but realistic, I think, about the projections coming up.
So one other quick question. I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but so in Highland, we do have some commercial growth in the future. Most of it tends to be food related. Do we get less sales tax from food sales?
If it is sold in a grocery store unprepared. So
These are going to be restaurants. So what
These
we
are
have
going to be restaurants.
These are
so-
restaurants. There's a restaurant tax. I guess that's what.
Right. I've never been sure just how the two taxes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it's prepared food at a restaurant, then no, that's going to, the same taxes would apply. So that would include our regular sales tax, the county option. It would include the parks tax, everything like you would spend.
So prepared
other
food's not the
retailers.
same.
So let's assume we have $1 million. We have a new restaurant open up and their annual sales are $1 million. If they go and put a tax on that, what type of revenue would the city get back if it was $1 million as a restaurant versus if it was just a standard retailer? Do you have any?
Restaurant versus standard retailer would be the same.
They don't have but there's a restaurant tax. So we don't benefit in the restaurant tax,
Correct.
the food tax. And
Right.
Okay.
Okay, that's helpful.
But how much would we generate if there was $1 million in sales and they had a sales tax on top of that? What would generate into the city?
I'd have to do a little math there. One thing to consider, as you may recall, there is a shared pool.
We get about 25% direct tax is what we calculated. I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
So whatever we generate, whatever is generated from sales in Highland or attributable to Highland, half of that stays and is distributed to Highland City. The other half goes into a pool. And of the revenue that Highland City receives in the end, about 75%, roughly, comes from that pool. So we actually see more revenue from the pool than from the.
That's
the revenue.
population based.
Yes.
Okay.
You can see that since fiscal year 18, in fiscal year 22, we are trending towards increases of roughly 50%, 49.5% in this first 7 months of the year. And then if the fiscal year ends were projected, that'd be roughly 45% compared to where things were in fiscal year 18.
And once again, you said it was a 4% increase from 2022 to 2023 is what you're projecting is 4%?
Correct. Great questions. Any other comments or questions on sales tax here? Certainly a lot of movement month to month.
Well, as you look at sales tax, naturally as prices go up in groceries and that, they're collecting more sales tax. Now, if we talk about, we always can get fearful, is there a recession, how they can control inflation. That's what we've got to be careful. We don't know. It could be if there's a little recession, people start to spend less, and so we pull back. If they don't, it could be inflation that they're spending more. I mean, it's the unknown.
Right.
So is everyone okay that they're going to project a 4% sales tax increase from this year? Is there any concern putting in the budget a 4% increase?
Fine with that.
I think it's fine. I think it's conservative, but that's good.
Great. Looking at property tax, first I'd like to point out here we're looking at kind of a combination between current year property taxes, and then for purposes of accounting, we also track separately delinquent property taxes. But it's the same revenue source. It's the property taxes paid by residents. Delinquent Property taxes is going to depend on the year and just what circumstances are for those individuals paying. But as noted at the bottom, that averages over this time period shown $128,000. So we're holding constant at the 125 with the delinquent property taxes, and showing where we're focusing growth in the top line. We did reach out to the county assessor, trying to pinpoint as growth comes on, as new development, what is the amount that we will see each year. They are not required by law to complete the tax roll until the end of May, and we did take a stab at trying to pencil out some things there, and it wasn't completely clear what their methodology was. So we will follow up here in May and June once those rolls are available.
So just to make sure, so here we are in 2022. If there was 0 homes built, we had no more homes built in Highland, this next year we'd have 1,950,000. The reason it's increased to 2,025,000 is because there's been new growth of homes. Does that make sense?
Correct.
And so if there was no growth at all, there's no tax increase. The only extra tax we're getting is because there's been new homes added in. And how many homes are you anticipating have been added to get us that extra $75,000?
So as we look at property values and what the city would receive for each home and aggregate that, for a $500,000 home, 55% of that is taxable, 45%.
The homeowner exemption if they're a homeowner.
Right. So off of that 500, then the city would receive an additional $268 per year on that home.
However, Boyer, if we remember hearing, they're going to put some in rental. They won't get that 55. They're going to have to pay it full boat, right? Because they're going to be rental units. They're not going to get a homeowner's exemption.
Correct.
And I just want to point out that that neighborhood's in my church ward, and some of the people are moving into their homes now.
They're starting to come.
Yeah, we had new members that had moved in, actually in the home. And I said, welcome to Highland. We appreciate your property tax. I did.
So that's what you equate when you see a new resident. You're a dollar sign to us. Welcome. Just give you a hard time, Scott.
And you're absolutely right, Mayor. To your point, another way to look at that, if you own your home and you've owned your home for 20 years, unless the city increases its property tax rate, the dollar amount that goes to the city does not change. Obviously, tax bills are changing practically every year. That's because there's other entities, agencies, school district and whatnot, other taxing entities, and that influences that tremendously as well.
Just one other comment, and I'm sorry but you give us a home that's worth $500,000 in Highland. I'm not so sure there's many of those homes. It seems like all these new homes they're building are multi-million-dollar homes, not in Boyer particularly, but in like the Hollows and the northwest part of the city. So it'd be nice. I guess you just double the 500,000 thing. Is that what you're saying?
Or 14.
Right. We use that 500 as an example, but you're absolutely right, and that's something that we're looking at very carefully with when that tax roll comes out to identify what those values are specifically. Yeah.
Tyler, the school district and the county, neither of those indexes to inflation either. Is that correct? Property tax?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's so crazy. It is. But it's crazy. Do you not think it's crazy? Your head is moving, and I can't tell if you're agreeing with me or disagreeing with me.
The only thing that indexes, no property tax in Utah indexes to inflation. Because of the way our truth in taxation process is set up, anytime anyone who levies a property tax wants to increase that tax, they have to go through the truth in taxation process. So the only thing that's really indexed to inflation is sales tax, because it's always the percentage of
Right.
whatever you're buying.
It's just as
There are
crazy.
cities who put it on the ballot every year to adjust their property tax according to inflation, right?
Yes, there's some cities and counties that have just adopted an ordinance that say we will go through truth and taxation year after year, regardless of, whether we need to or not, because we're going to always index to inflation.
Just makes sense.
Yeah, it's so crazy.
And to that point, the city has reserved a hearing date for truth and taxation, should that be necessary. You have to reserve that in advance to make sure that we're not holding the hearing the same evening as an overlapping entity like the school district. But it's a very simple process.
What date did we choose?
August 2nd. Is that right? Thanks, Erin. August 2nd. So early in the month there. Great questions. Any others regarding the property tax? Great. All right. Another significant source of ongoing revenue related to the public safety. And so these are generally assessments that are paid to Lone Peak Public Safety District for administration, which includes dispatch, fire, and police as well. In fiscal year 20, there was a need to consider additional revenue. As Cedar Hills left the district, they were participating in the fire and EMS department. Through extensive engagement with the public, determined that residents supported at that time a fee structure as opposed to the property tax increase at that time. So the monthly fee of $11.50 per account there generates approximately $650,000. And the budget that we're sharing with you, and we'll discuss in greater detail next week as well, includes and assumes increasing that fee times 2, so $23 a month, which would generate, instead of $650,000, $1.3 million. A lot to go into that discussion and consideration. As we look at the budget...
Now, Tyler, so you're saying the draft budget is now 1.3, so it's now doubled from 650. You're doubling again another 650 in to get the fee to 23. That does not, so I've sat down with the budget, that does not take out any of those expenses that we earmarked that maybe the council needs to look at as either one time or ongoing. How I looked at is what is, and how would I like the council, we need to be aware, what does it take as a budget? What's the actual budget we need to operate the city? Then we have different projects, if it be, you can say, hey, we need to have new playgrounds to operate the city, or we need to have certain things. But we try to say, okay, this is how we operate. If we need to buy certain things, we've kind of pulled that out to be on a separate sheet. Does that make sense? So, hey, this is what we need for operation. But if we're going to be doing our, like if we want to go and do a general plan update, well, that's extra money. If we want to go and do, new playgrounds, or if we want to do certain projects, we've pulled that out and it needs to come back into the budget. But that number there doesn't take into account any of it being pulled out.
Right. So somewhat of a placeholder here initially, but two very important questions that we'll discuss in greater detail as we meet with you individually and next week. One, as you stated, Mayor, how much of an increase really is necessary? Is an increase necessary at all? And that depends on the expense side considerably. And then number two, should that, if an increase is necessary, should that come in the form of increased fee or through property tax? So just something to keep in mind there.
In that discussion, and I brought this up with Chief William as well, but I would like to see, if I have to go to the citizens and say, we're going to have you pay another $125 or $130 a year for public safety, and that's just looking at the fee, or increased property tax. I'd like to know more as a councilman, one, how many calls there are to the paramedics in the fire. I'd like to know how many calls and requests for help there are with the police. And I'd like to know kind of revenue generated and tickets issued. I mean, we just heard at the first of this meeting again that we have a lot of distracted drivers. And one of the ways to enforce that is to have the police there, observing or ticketing people. I get the general impression, and I think it's maybe just an impression, that we're not doing a lot to enforce our traffic safety laws in this city. And if I have to go to the people and say, you need to pay another $125 a year, I want to see what job the police is doing for us and what the call volume and things are, because it would help me justify it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Because I'm not on the safety board, but I never hear those statistics discussed on the council level, and I would like to have those available.
So Nathan, when the council goes to the budget, I call them the little Lego man that talk about how many man and what they do with call volume. Will they have those sheets? Like what they've shown us? I mean, that should be given to the whole council, isn't it?
It has
Well,
been.
I've got those sheets on that, but I'd like to know ongoing what it's been historical and things. Okay?
That's a great request. I think that's appropriate. Also with the general fund, keeping in mind one-time revenues, two particular areas that are significant, one being development, and we're anticipating in fiscal year 23 approximately $900,000 in building-related one-time revenues from building permits and plan check fees.
But you have expenses against that though too.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, the American Rescue Plan Act, we received $1.1 million last July, and we'll receive another installment of that same amount in July coming up. Those are funds that, again, one time, keeping that in mind that they wouldn't be something that we want to rely on for years down the road. Any questions with regard to one time or anything with the general fund that you'd like us to look at specifically? Great. Turning our attention to the enterprise and capital funds, generally two sources, impact fees and service charges. Service charges in the utility funds, we're anticipating incremental growth, and that's consistent with the utility rate studies that have been performed. The utility rate study is in the process of being reviewed, given the increased costs for which we addressed the impact fee increases as well recently. The budget you'll also see at a number of places prior year carryover. This is simply a representation of fund balance that has been saved in prior years in anticipation and to be used for capital projects. You'll note that in each of the utility funds that the funds have been saved up in prior years specifically for that use. With regard to impact fees, we are assuming roughly 250 units coming online and fees being paid for those. Road, sewer, and PI, sewer and PI specifically, those fees were increased and will be effective the end of June. We are reviewing the park impact fee. We've had discussions with the mayor, as the park impact fee is primarily dedicated to payment of the bond related to parks, and assessing when funds are sufficient to pay off the bond, which we anticipate being sooner than the final payment in September of 2027. How we can use those funds, and if there's any restrictions or other assessments that need to occur. As I mentioned, the sewer and PI fees, those increases have not yet gone into effect. The 90-day waiting period will come to an end at the end of June. So that concludes what I prepared this evening. Are there any other particular questions that you'd like us to look into?
I have a couple of questions. Can I just ask you one quick line item question on the budget?
Sure.
So why is it currently that Alpine's dispatch expenses are 0 and ours are 92,000?
Is that the actual payments?
Yeah.
And you're looking at the Lone Peak?
Yeah,
budget?
I am. I'm looking at, line M1043-80.
I don't have that one in front of me, right off the top, but the timing of payments, there may be a difference when the payments were made. I'll have to
Can
look
you
at
tell
that.
me generally, with regards to the public safety budget, how much of it is divided up like via a percentage versus pay for use kind of a thing? Does that make sense? Like, what items do we pay for based on actual use versus what items do we just pay 60% or whatever for?
Great question. There's a few different sources. Primarily, the district is funded by assessments to the cities. Outside of that, the most significant source is service charges through EMS. So if the fire department transports someone, makes its way through insurance, whatnot, and we're anticipating roughly $400,000 in revenue next year. That, in effect, reduces what has to be assessed to the cities. Now, with regard to the assessments, they are based on population, specifically for Highland, for administration and police. And then fire is a little more calculation involved. 45% of the assessment is based on population, 45% on equivalent residential units, which factors in non-residential properties. And then 10% is a 50-50 split between the two cities.
Does anything factor in like rooftop square footage? Right, like the difference between home sizes?
That's the ADU, isn't it? Does the ADU only look at commercial, or is it looking at house sizes? Like, if we,
Yeah.
does it look at house sizes,
No.
Nathan? So if this, so we have one community that has a whole bunch of 10,000, 20,000 square foot homes, another community has 3,000 square foot homes, it's both, they're being charged the same, it doesn't matter on square foot sizes.
Correct.
Does that answer what your question was?
Yeah. Has that formula just been the same forever?
No, it was changed back in 2010 or 11, where they had a property value based in it. But it's been that way since 2010, 11-ish.
I think a background primer on that kind of stuff would be super helpful if we are going to talk about an increase to that public safety fee, just knowing how it's paid for and how it's split up and what comes from where. Like dispatch, isn't that per call? Like if I butt dial 911, it's like $100, right? And if I call him back to say I hung up on you because I didn't have an emergency, then it's another $100.
So the dispatch portion is billed directly to the cities based on
Calls.
right, and that's a budget. Yes, based on call volume. So we're not supplementing, Highland does not supplement any of the dispatch cost that Alpine has.
So
this
that's
year.
one of the items that is paid for by use, not just by a split percentage or that formula. It's strictly per use.
Yes.
I'll quit dialing 911.
Now, at this time, as you look at the budget coming up with Lone Peaks, we're going to be tomorrow, what percentage is Highland paying out of that budget? What percentage?
Approximately 71% is where the,
That's including dispatch.
71% includes dispatch?
Yes.
And that's before we include the growth in our new growth that we're going to have coming
Correct. The registry's
in
not been
Scottsward.
Yeah,
No, it's there, that's just the assessment based on this, it has nothing to do with new growth
Current
right now.
population.
That's just the assessment based on this year's budget, based on permits as of the end of December 2021.
Is there a way to analyze call volume versus public safety employees, comparing it to other cities and what their public safety employees, how many they have and how many calls they get? Does that make sense?
I'm sure that's something that could be done.
Okay.
So we have access to our dispatch stats, and we have, at the end of the year, they send us a summary of all the calls in dispatch. Beyond that, we wouldn't have access to any city's calls.
So
And dispatch won't give it to us.
so
We
here,
can't call and say, hey, give us Orem. No, they won't do that.
here's something that may be of interest. The fire department had 1,278 calls last year. Of those calls, 73 were up the canyon, AF Canyon. And we're hardly getting any money back from when we spawn up the canyon with the county. So that's what we're also looking at is, if you go look at how much the call, what, I think I did a calculation, you guys remember, was it $2,400 per call? I mean, it cost us about $2,400 per safety call. I mean, all I know is, once you calculate it, then you go, and if you're going up 73 times, and we didn't hardly get any money back from the county, we're really short in what the county should be reimbursing us. You're looking at all the different things.
So they had 1,278 calls, but of those 1,278, how many of those calls actually resulted in a fire, resulted in somebody going out?
I mean, how, where they actually responded to, that's a
Thank
good.
you. Sorry,
I don't know if
responded.
where there's a fire truck in front of the house, if you want to say, or.
Yes.
I don't, Nathan, do you know, is that the call or is that response to a home, the 1278?
Response to the call, yeah.
That's a call?
It's a call.
So if AF calls for mutual aid and they start down the road and then get called off, that's a call?
Let me clarify that real quick.
'Cause that'd be it. There's a lot of times, they're for mutual aid, once they see there's some type of structure and they go, okay, it's a commercial, they'll call it out to the neighboring, units.
Sure.
To start heading, as they get going, they're going, oh, never mind, it was a false alarm, and then they have to turn and come back.
Yeah.
That call volume data, though, it doesn't ever include, does it, which vehicles and how many were taken to a specific call?
The stuff that we get from dispatch, no. We have to actually go into the specific reporting system and try to pull a report and then clean the data and then try to create something that's usable to do that.
Like, that just seems like that's like an interesting metric to know, because you can get 300 calls a year, but to know how many of those times you needed all of the equipment, I think, I don't know.
Don't disagree, and we're hoping, since you're on the dispatch board, you can help us get it.
I am totally gonna do that.
It just seems like that should be automated.
Yeah.
Okay.
But those spreadsheets are ridiculous.
Yes.
They're not even useful, really.
Correct. It was, for us, we actually had to go and have the police pull all the data, then we had to go clean and scrub it to make sure it was accurate, to get rid of any duplicates, and then we had to actually analyze it to see what we could do and how to use it.
I was super good spreadsheet work.
You know, one thing we have to realize about our public safety, like, you know, AF and Lehigh, American Fork and Lehigh, they respond each city to about 5,000 calls. Pleasant Grove has 6 firemen on, and I believe when we were talking, they respond to about 3,000 calls. But we're hearing that Pleasant Grove has a lot of mutual aid. Realize they're kind of the heart where they're by American Fork and Linden and all those others that can. We're a little bit up in North County, and so some of our responses, we're trying to cover certain areas because of the response time where we're not right next to we're not surrounded by cities. And so I think some of our call volume and probably also our mixture. We don't have, the more commercial you have coming in, the more calls you're going to have. More traffic has more calls. You know, but you know, residential homes, traditional, don't have a ton of calls.
Wait, so how many calls did Pleasant Grove have, you say?
I think on a
3,000.
Right,
3,000?
is that who was in the meeting with me when we were going through that? It was about 3,000. I remember Pleasant Grove having.
I'd have to look, I don't know.
6
remember it off
full-time
the top of my head.
But
firefighters?
they also give up a lot of their transport. They also, so some of it, when we talk about this 400,000 that Tyler's talking about, they're trying to get also transport fees, you know, to help.
Yeah, I mean, but how many full-time firefighters do we have?
We are staffing for 8,
And we have 1,200?
1287.
I guess the transport thing, is that covering the cost of more firefighters?
You're asking me a transparency question. When we looked at it, they wanted to add up to 9 so they could add and make sure they're covering. And when we looked at the dollar amount, we felt like what they were going to project to grab for revenue and what the cost was to bring it on, it didn't compensate for to try to get the increase of revenue. We were still about 75,000 short.
Exactly.
But you have to remember, Pleasant Grove is double our population. They're at 44,000, 45,000.
Sure.
I am sure.
Wow.
I own a home over there too.
So that's some information.
Yeah,
Double
they're
population.
double the size.
6 firefighters.
Yeah.
That's what we heard, and I'm sure that's, am I speaking right?
The size of
Nathan? You were
Highland, though,
saying-
you add Alpine in, we're pretty close.
It's hard because we
Yeah.
don't have our police and fire here to be able to help answer.
I don't want to quote anything on top of my head, so I would prefer to have them answer
That's
these
what I'm saying, is that
questions.
maybe we're getting some numbers that could be a little bit off.
Can I ask you a process question then instead? So, when was the last time you say that those, what do they call them? Calculation, the formula was adjusted? When was the last
The
time?
assessment formula
Yeah.
in 2010-11.
So theoretically, though, if we ever wanted to look at that formula or adjust something that was 10 years ago, we would have to decide that on the Public Safety Board, which is currently, Alpine has the deciding vote there, right?
Currently, yes.
Yeah, but we have also to say about budget.
There's also a provision in the interlocal agreement with Alpine that requires review if a certain city's percentages increase a certain amount.
Was it 3%?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, I
No,
just
it's
was,
not that way,
was
it's
wondering,
The formula.
like,
on the
how long
formula.
until that formula is, I mean, is it ever outdated, or is there like,
I think that's up to the board to bring out of what do we want to look at. You know, is there a different way to calculate it that we feel is, you know, fair, you know, or things of that nature?
So
is
just
this a
some-
nationwide standard of how something like this is calculated when it's split between municipalities?
It's just negotiated between the two municipalities. Here's a little background is each budget cycle, when there is a large increase, whether it was the last one or 2 or 3 years, 2011 or whatever it is, there's always a comment of, we have to do something about the assessment formula. And staff always approaches the board and says, we need to do something about the assessment formula. We need to start working groups. We want to start whatever, and there's no appetite to do so. So as a council and as members on the board, it's really your responsibility to drive that and make sure, and we will provide the support, obviously, but as elected officials, we can't drive it. Staff can't drive it. You guys have to drive it.
I just think it's a really good thing for us to understand, because especially looking at these big increases, and it's such a huge part of our budget, I think it's important for us to understand.
It is, but I think we also have to know if we're talking, what is it we're talking is a possible way to evaluate the change. Does that make sense? So are we looking at it needs to be ADU size? Are we looking about crash, how many, do they respond 80% to Highland and only 20 to Alpine, or are they responding 40% up in the Alpine and they're responding 20 to Highland, and yet we're paying 71%? I mean, you could go off responses, because that's where our
And
cost
again,
is.
I don't know how you would do it, because it seems like more accidents are gonna happen in Highland, because you have to go through Highland to get to Alpine. So I don't know how you do it,
So
it seems like an interesting conversation.
we have looked at, do you do it by call?
Correct.
If we do it by call,
Then
one
we
worse
lose.
off than the current assessment. Just because of what you said.
Yeah,
is
because
the
everybody
main-
goes through Highland to get to Alpine.
We looked at it when we did this last tax increase. I remember Mayor Mann was looking at different options to look, hey, what might be fair. You need to be aware as a board, when it came up, that Highland is 71%, and Alpine's gonna be that, down there at 20. I brought up about, it seemed unreasonable that here we have them have 50-50 say in the, on the vote. And yet the question came up is, well, but we have, where the council has control is not approve the budget. Does that mean if we feel there's something not fair, then you do it part of the budget?
Okay. And I'm not saying, I don't know if anything has to change or not, or that we need more anything. I'm just interested in understanding,
Analyzing it.
the way it works if we're thinking about increases.
Great questions.
I want to ask a question one time where Tyler's like, that was stupid. You always say it's a great question.
Well, just ask a stupid question, Brittany, and see what happens.
Okay,
You could say good, better, or best.
sure. That's a radar question.
That's a good question.
So has there been time set apart for the council to be able to, with each council person to be able to now come in and go through the budget?
Yes, so there's been an invitation extended. We have 2 scheduled. We have to reschedule Sarah and offer to meet with anybody else.
Tomorrow.
Can we postpone this one and move? So the next item on our agenda is Mountain Ridge Park. Because we don't have Brian Braithwaite, who is on our Parks Committee as our chair, I'd like to move now to item number 4 until Brian gets here, and hopefully he'll be here shortly. And so if we can move to item number 4, PI water messaging.
Mayor, just one comment. The removing dispatch or admin cost, Highland pays 64.7% of the public safety bill. And that doesn't change that much. So it's basically 65%.
Okay.
of the
Moving
total.
on to the pressurized irrigation messaging. Jeff?
Jeff and I are going to tag team this one, Mayor. So we just wanted to, I think there was an inquiry from council. Okay, so what are we going to do this year? Oh, and I'm just remembering I forgot to put something on this list. What are we going to do this year to communicate drought and PI and water conservation and those things? So I've worked with Corinne we have a communications calendar that we schedule out the different things that we're going to talk about, whether through our different alert systems. And so our plan is the beginning of the month, Jeff or somebody from Public Works and myself will meet to kind of plan out, okay, what are we going to talk about this month? What's the focus, right? So in April, hopefully you got the newsletter and read, it was weight to water, water only is needed kind of a thing. And so that's the focus in April. In May, it might be similar messaging of, only water is needed type of a thing. But, as we get into the hotter parts of the year, it might change to, make sure to water based on the schedule or just depending on what's going on. So we'll come up with that plan. And then our plan is to weekly put something on social media. We have a little Water Wednesday that we're planning on doing. And then once a month, use our email and text alert tool, as well as put something in the newsletter and make sure that our website is up to date with proper information.
Erin, do you pay per time you send out a text or an alert, or you just we pay a fee?
We pay an annual fee to use that service.
as many times as we want.
Yes.
Without irritating people.
What do we do to
Trying to
build,
not irritate people.
So how do we build our social media? Like when you say we put it out on the Highland Facebook page, has there been anything we go out there to ask people to like it, to build the page?
We do paid ads every once in a while, especially on certain posts that we're wanting to get more views on, or to just build our following as it is. So it's gone up quite a bit over the past few years.
But I mean, are we doing anything? Because it appears as someone likes your page, then you start to pull up on their searches. Have you guys looked at, whoever's doing the social media, some things that way to build it? Or what are we doing to build our text alert or email alert? Have we been putting messaging in the newsletter? Hey, please sign up. Because I think that's important to keep building that. If that's just the method we're trying to get these information out, are we really covering everyone by that information?
It is, and the hard part, especially about social media, is the algorithms change all the time, right? So as soon as you think you get it right, Facebook changes what they do. So Corinne actually went to a training. This is unfortunate, right, because she's leaving us, but Corinne went to a training last week about Facebook and trying to reach more users. And so she got some tips and tricks there. We're constantly trying to adapt and change and reach more users. But you're right. Honestly, one of the highest things is if we send out something and then people start interacting with the post by liking or commenting or sharing, then Facebook says, oh, this must be interesting, and it'll boost up in the algorithms, right? And so that's why on occasion you'll see us in our weekly briefs to you and things say, hey, please share this post, or things to that nature. The more that you share those, even like on your personal pages or on your city council pages, it helps in our in that. As far as the email text alert, I will say that's something we can do better to try and get more subscriptions, but what we do right now is it's when people move into the city, right, we give them information about it, and it is in most newsletters that we mail out as well, and it's on the front page of our website.
So I didn't see the flashing electronic sign on
Yes,
this
that's
list.
the one I forgot. When I looked over at you, I said, Scott loves the signs, and we need to put the signs on here. But yes, Jeff and I talked about that today.
I was out of town and I saw the Easter egg sign the day after the Easter egg hunt, but it still was great.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, so you're right. I think I don't see any issue with, especially during the hot months, using it as long as it's not needed for elsewhere. We can move the sign around.
I don't see any sign spinner guys.
Not in the budget, so if council would like to put that into the budget.
Tyler, would you like to do that as part of your responsibilities?
Absolutely. Sounds like a
I
great
was waiting
activity
for you to tell me that was a dumb question.
You should have said it was a dumb question.
It was a
That's what I
great
going
question.
for.
We could take it on as a council that we all take a 15, 20-minute sign spinner.
I'll dress up and do that.
Yeah, if I'm dressed up, I'd
Dress
do
up
it.
as a
What's a sign
faucet.
spinner?
Yeah,
No, the
Kim's
guy that
gonna
does a
dress up,
sprinkler
do it, and
hose,
like
That one
run
is
20
Liberty
miles along the
Tax
way.
or
It's so
pizza, and he
annoying.
has it, and he's on the corner spinning around. He could say "Save water" and do the spinning, and it'd get attention.
I volunteer my kid.
You could joke about it. It really could be effective.
I could.
If you
Oh,
put
yeah,
it,
I always watch them, yeah.
Your kid's cute, Kim. You could bring him along, get even more, interest, right? It'd be fun.
They do it for
He does.
slushies. They do it for slushies.
and then the other communication content is
Just
this-
kind of the sources that we're planning on using. So I don't know if you guys follow Division of Water Resources. It's called Utah Save H2O on Facebook, but they're hilarious. They make water conservation funny and in ways that I didn't even know you could be funny. But so we'll use some of their information. We'll talk about for storage levels and why the need for conservation. Like, it's an education for me, not being a public works employee, right? For me to understand, so we had a better water this year. So I was thinking, we're in a better shape. Oh, but it turns out we used all of our savings bank last year, and so we're actually in worse shape. So just helping people understand that. And we're working on seeing if we can pull data we can do system-wide data, how much water we're using and things of that nature.
What is that Facebook page called?
I think it's Utah Saves H2O. It's Division of Water Resources, but they have a catchier name than that on Facebook. So I will look that up while Jeff talks to you. We thought while we were talking PI meters, we'd talk about well, about PI, we talk about meters.
Now, if we got in a bad situation, we will do a mailer out to say, hey, this time we're only watering once a week because of limited water, or twice a week. I mean, once we get where we start to see we're starting to get some emails, Jeff, just so you where people are wondering why we didn't wait till May 1st. I know you addressed that the last time, but we're going to have some residents saying, hey, how come you're not giving a little more message of enforcement and things that way? So we'll have to just see as that goes through the year. This storm we have come in today was probably very helpful.
Yeah,
Hopefully,
it's great. Unfortunately, next week will probably be 70, 80 degrees. So that's how the spring goes in Utah. So
yeah.
hopefully not. Hopefully we have a wet spring and things turn out great for us.
So all these things are helpful, but we really need to work on education. I mean, Councilman Braithwaite, we were talking last night when we were talking about Mountain Ridge Park. He said in his neighborhood, you could tell when the pressurized irrigation started because everybody's sprinklers came on and they have ice all over their yards now. And it's just kind of, crazy if we could somehow educate people.
So Jeff, one of the things that helped me many years ago, maybe we even have to take a video that says, go take a can, if it be a little tuna fish can, and you put it out there, and as your sprinklers go by, it might be a dry spot. You might be getting enough water for your system, but it might be, and how do I know if I'm getting enough water in that dry spot or enough water in my grass? Is, maybe that we can educate, and it might have to be a little video we do, or maybe we can find one online that says, hey, go put these following cans on your system as it sprinkles, and it lets you know what you're getting coverage-wise.
Yeah, and I know in years past, Central Utah and Weber Base and several other districts have offered free services to come out and to analyze your yard, how much water you're using various methods. Not a tuna can, but that's a great suggestion. They had measuring devices that they could place in your yard to see how much water was being used, and those were free of charge, that they would come out and do those services.
I had someone come many years ago, and I thought it was maybe someone from the city that came out and helped me, because I see what happens. We have dry spots, and maybe it's my sprinkler is not functioning correctly, but yet I keep turning my timer on trying to get that dry spot, but it's my sprinkler issue.
Right.
And that's when I can see that being a helpful message saying, hey, be aware, it might not be a grass stripe, it might be a sprinkler problem.
Yeah, and we can look into some things that we can add onto our social media updates and things like that are helpful tips, useful tips that they can use.
What costume would you have that would go with this, Kim? We could call you the water girl, and you could go out there and...
I could just dress up as like a green hose, maybe? I don't know.
Or you could be our water
sprinkler.
superhero to save the water.
Done.
That's
done. W on my cape, squirting people. I think one thing what?
It's recycled.
Spraying people with Diet Coke? I don't know.
Anyway.
Hey, one thing I would love is to be able to, for all of us to have water meters on our houses and to be able to know what is that projected when we eventually do have to be metered, for us to know how much are we going over for water, how difficult is it to actually meet our water allocation, and then we can kind of post that and let people know, hey, this is what's coming, this is how much I've been overwatering, this is eye-opening to me having a water meter on.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely do that. We've done that with previous council. Tim Irwin has one, Brian Braithwaite has one, a lot of the previous men.
Brian told us last night he doesn't have
No,
it.
he has one.
Oh, yeah.
But he doesn't know what the reading is. So Brian says, yeah, I've got one, but I have no idea how much I'm using.
Yeah, right now he can come in and we can let him know how much he's using for sure. I mean, we could go out and read it
and then
find
he
out
would know
how much.
also how much he should be using.
Yeah, we can
I
figure
think
that
that'd be
out.
important. So, okay, I got a meter. You're for this lot size. This is what we'd be averaging, and we could say, hey, you're overwatering or not, or it'd be
Right.
interesting to know.
It might even be nice to put it on a few political influencers' houses also. I don't know. Because, I mean, the ones that really get out there and talk about stuff. I don't know.
Or a blogger.
Blogger. I know some bloggers.
Okay.
Yeah, but that kind of rolls us into what we're talking here. Phase one, this year we're trying to get 300 meters installed. That a lot of it's limited to a supply of meters and getting them here in Highland. But that's part of our plan, is to install those 300. We have three different locations where we wanted to start to isolate and collect some of that data and information, not only the usage, but how these are installed, what it takes to install an A, B, or a C type meter, depending on the situation where they're located. We went to Alpine City and kind of learned from their mistakes, and they kind of directed us to use this ABC scale on how much we would charge a contractor to install such meters.
So if it's new build, the contractor's installing, is that correct?
They install the material there, we actually install the actual meter.
And
but
then
it's
over-
pretty
and
much pull out and place in
And just so
place.
the council knows, we were over in the Boyer or Ridgeview, if it's a town home, is it like 4 units, they're 1 meter or something like that, or?
It's a variety. There's some general area meters that are actually 1.5 to a 2-inch meter. Some of the condos, or whatever you call them, the twin homes that back the canal, there's 1 meter per 2 units. But most of those are open areas. It's an HOA, so they're trying to maximize that, and so they have just a couple large connections for the whole area. If it's a single-family dwelling, then they will have their individual meter. And then our second thing I wanted to talk about was our grant process, things that we're doing to try to receive some of these grants. We applied for the Smart Water Grant, which has been a grant that's been around for several years. Our application's in, we're just waiting for the response for a yay or nay on that. It was supposed to be at the end of March, but due to, I think, the high volume and different things, they've delayed that to let us know on that one. The next one that just recently came out from Governor Cox, the state grant, the ARPA grant, we are pursuing that also. The application for that's due May 15th. We're in the process of getting all that information in order to submit that grant, and we're hopeful of that one. We had a meeting with her, Andy and Tavis and I, over the phone to discuss what we needed to do, any tips or anything like that, and she was pretty hopeful that the majority of the people that are going to apply for that grant will receive the funding, and it's 70% funding for that project, for the cost of your project.
So it is 70% funding, but I know that it's going to probably be a hard time finding water meters because we have to have them in by a certain date.
Right.
All these cities will be going for it. Is there a way to get a jump start on securing water meters?
Yeah, we've currently have a lot on order.
Okay.
So we're in the queue for the census water meters that we're using.
Okay.
We will just continue to increase that and add more meters onto that queue list from Mountain Land Supply. That's where we're receiving our meters from. But so yeah, there is a long wait period for those, but they are anticipating that will turn around a little bit. It's a lot associated with the microchips, the same issue with the Ford trucks that are on order across the country. So it's a nationwide thing, but they say they're hoping there's an end to that and they'll start to get production up and going.
So now on the federal dollars we applied for, when do we hear back if we got that grant?
It should be, I know Andy reached out to them just recently and they're hopeful by the end of this month, correct?
Well, yeah, he said they weren't sure of the exact funding source and that there would have been delayed and that, keep checking their website, keep checking back. So, I mean, I've emailed him last week, but.
So if we get the federal dollars, when we apply for the state, do we have to say if we've gotten other grants, or is that separate?
The state grant, correct me if I'm wrong, but it will cover up to, so say it's $10 million to apply to install all these meters, and we receive $250,000 or $2,500,000. They will fund up to $7,500,000. So they won't double dip on that, but
Okay.
they will make up that difference.
That's why I was just wondering if there was a double dip in or not, so,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you for all that work and doing all those grant applications.
But any questions from you guys? I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, but we're just pursuing forward.
When they ask on the grant, is there anything about demographics or household income in that, or is it, what are they asking? The state grant, or any of the grants. I'd just be interested what type of information they're requesting.
The federal grant, as I recall, it's been a couple months since we filled it out. It was like in November when we filled that all out, October, November. But that was a lot focused on, how would our, what would the efficiencies that we would see, it was all about, kind of, for lack of a better word, bang for your buck, and the state application, we haven't gotten that deep into it yet to be able to answer that. But from talking to her on the phone, I don't think that our demographics are gonna necessarily,
Play into it.
be a negative. She was actually really positive with us on the phone that she thought that most that applied, would get funded. She felt like they had enough funding to help most that were going to apply.
And that was
So she gives-
$250 million that they allocated.
250 million is what they have to allocate, and so she gave us. We came away from the phone call feeling pretty good about the state program.
So Jeff, you're thinking it's a $10 million ask we have to put the meters in?
I just kind of threw that out as a round number. I'm not
Well,
sure exactly what the figure is.
Well, it was 8 million when we did the federal grant in October, so we're 8 million plus now.
Okay.
Because one thing that's going to come into play is with $250 million floating in the economy to do meters. Either a lot of other people are going to jump into the meter business, which might be somewhat what happens. That's how the market reacts, but prices also go up, supply and demand, right? So we probably are, up. We're 8 million plus, and we're going to do our best to figure out what that increase is.
And the meters that we do have on order, the 300 plus that we have on order, that is retroactive, that grant, the state grant is, so up to a year retroactive. So we can order parts now and purchase parts now and still receive that grant reimbursement.
Sounds good. Okay, if we're done with that item, why don't we move to garbage rates, and then once we're done with that, then we'll go to Mountain Ridge Park.
Sounds great. Okay, Mayor and Council. So to give you some background, as a reminder, the city made the switch to waste management for our garbage service provider in July of 2020. At that time, the City Council set rates with the anticipation of having about $50,000 in net revenue for the city, and what that allows is that every year we don't have to increase rates as inflation and other factors happen, and that so essentially we're able to absorb those inflationary impacts for a few years before we have to raise rates to residents again. That had been about the average of the previous years, the net revenue there at the time we set rates. Unfortunately, what we planned on happening has not happened. So the very first year that we used waste management, we had about $15,000 revenue over expenses. This year, we're actually budgeted to be $7,000 expenses over revenue in our budget this year. If we do not change garbage rates for next fiscal year, the general fund will be subsidizing garbage $122,000 approximately.
What's caused that? That's a big jump.
That is a big jump. Let me tell you a few reasons. So a few different things happened from Republic Service to Waste Management. The first is we really did not have an accurate can count when we switched over to Waste Management. So what we told them we had was dramatically under what we actually had. And that was in part due to us, in part due to Republic Service. The can count that we received from them was dramatically lower. In addition, Waste Management does a different methodology for how they charge the city than Republic Service did. Everything was just in a can count with Republic Service. But with Waste Management, they charge us for Christmas tree pickup, for the spring cleanup, and for all of the dumpsters at our various parks. Parks and city buildings, and that adds up to about $100,000. Now, we did try to anticipate that when we switched over to Waste Management, but our numbers were not we tried our best to get our numbers accurate there, but honestly, we were guessing in some regards because we didn't know accurate numbers from our public service. In addition, we did see some delay in charges from Waste Management, so we did our projections for that first year budget. Second year budget, I only had about 3 or 4 months worth of data by the time I was setting the budget for the following fiscal year. And so we probably should have adjusted rates this year, but we didn't know until budget had been passed, things had moved along really. And then the last thing is our favorite word that we talk about all the time, inflation. So our contract with Waste Management has an inflationary component to it, and right now I don't have a final number yet, but they're telling me between 8 and 11% increase this fiscal year.
So who gets to determine what the inflation rate is?
It's a CPI number. I don't have the exact contract in front of me, methodology, but it's CPI over the last so many months, and that's what the number is. And so as we know, he told me between 8 and 11%. So right now I have a 10% increase in there. Another impact is just our housing growth with Ridgeview. Because at this point we're essentially losing money every single can, the more houses we add there, the more money we are going to lose per can. So the garbage, it's not a fund, it's a department within the general fund. But if you look at garbage, it's a $1.17 million. There's 3 main components to our garbage department. First is what we pay to North Point when Waste Management takes our garbage there, we have to pay tipping fees for them to dump our garbage there. The second is our Waste Management contract, which makes up the bulk of that. And again, that is per can rates, but that's also included those other non-can rates that we talked about. And then the smallest portion is what we allocate to that department for the time that our staff spends, and for the time we spent, or for the costs in regards to billing, credit card fees, things of that nature that happen as a part of our bills. Essentially, those get split out between the departments so our utility departments along with garbage. So what does it actually cost us? So in taking all of these numbers into consideration, and then in also looking at, like we talked about, the inflation numbers and the growth numbers we're expecting, this is what it costs the city per can, what garbage costs the city, what the city pays per can. And so it's $10.70 a month for garbage for the first can, $7.47 for the second can, and recycling is $7.10. Our current rates, as you can see, are actually below what our monthly costs are estimated to be next year. So we're about $1 below for garbage, and then 70 cents and 80 cents about for the second garbage can and recycling cans. So options, what can we do at this point? So of course we do have the option to stay as is, leave our rates as they are. Again, what that will mean is the general fund is going to be subsidizing garbage $122,000. The second option that staff's come up with is essentially to set rates at their break-even point, where we're estimating rates to, where we're estimating the costs to garbage to be. What that would mean ultimately for residents is if you had 2 garbage cans and 1 recycling can at your home, it would be $2.64 per month increase, or $31 annual increase. And again, that would be a break-even point for the city. If you wanted to set rates, again, with about a net revenue of around $50,000 to accommodate for inflation for a couple of years and allow for some wiggle room, so that's what the rates would need to be. What that would mean, again, if you had 2 garbage cans and 1 recycling can at your home, would be $3.76 per month increase you would see to your bill, or $45 per year. And again, that would provide the city with about $50,000 in net revenue for the garbage department.
Now remember why we're trying to have a net revenue?
Essentially, it's just it allows for some flexibility in case I tried to do my best estimates I absolutely could at this point, but in case something is off. And number 2, inflation, every single year, our waste management contract is going to increase. So it's a question for council. Do you want to have to increase every single year, or do you want to be able to go 2 or 3 years in between increases?
Did it increase like that when we were with
Republic?
Republic Service was a flat 2% increase every year.
And yes, you are correct, probably looking at this. We had a lot of complaints with Republic Services, why we went to waste management. We were getting a lot of complaints. You know, you always can look hindsight and try to make different decisions, but you're going, yeah, that Republic Service, we had a lot of complaints, but your costs were a little bit, you know, weren't the same.
And they did come back to try to renegotiate, and the council said no.
Yeah, so Republic gave us a proposal to extend the contract. The council said no, we wanted to go out to bid. Waste Management, ACE, and Republic bid, and Waste Management was the cheapest of the three.
When the bid came in.
I honestly don't remember the renewal rates, though, to know if Republic had given us another flat rate or not.
No. We were just getting a lot of complaints. I mean,
I doubt it.
It was kind of that perfect storm where we had all these complaints, and it's one reason, and our contract was coming up. Is that right, Scott?
That's what I remember.
We are where we're at. What's our contract? What's our contract? What's our time on with Waste Management? Was it a 10-year contract?
I can't remember if it's 5 or 10 years. I will try and look that up really quickly.
So, but your question is do we want to break even? You know, this has to still come, you know, as a vote.
Yes, this would have to be a formal vote at council level. This was kind of me just wanting to give you a heads up. I know this isn't wonderful news, and then also to get your feedback as to kind of what should staff put in the preliminary budget at this point. But yes, rates would need to be adopted as a part of the budget process in the fee schedule.
I mean, if we're going to be asking for, you know, increase for public safety, we just got to be careful about all these increases.
Well, yeah, we're quickly getting up to $200 a year.
I'll just say, I quickly
Yeah.
looked at the contract, at least, I don't think it was the final version, but it was the version I edited, and it was a 5-year term with automatic renewals, unless we give them 180 days notice prior to the renewal to terminate.
I am very impressed that Rob remembered of all the contracts I sent him to review.
Did you just look it up, though?
That's not something you
Don't
want to
admit
switch
that.
very often, though. That was a hassle getting all
It
those
was,
new garbage
well, and it
cans
didn't help
stuff.
that it was during COVID, right? It
Oh,
was
yeah.
horrendous.
So maybe this could be kind of a funny question. A lot of us have gotten a little picture in the mail that they were going to charge us $1. How many times have they charged the customer an extra, or our residents an extra $1?
I'm sorry, I thought I sent you an email on this, and maybe I didn't. That was a mistake. So Republic Service does have they are testing the technology to be able to do that.
Waste Management.
Thank you. Waste Management is testing the technology to do that, right? Cameras on the truck that take a picture when your can's being dumped to show whether it's overfull or not. And they have deployed that technology with some of their private contracts, like with HOAs and private neighborhoods. It's not something they've deployed in Highland, and it was just an error in their software system where they sent it out to Highland. So we got lots of angry phone calls. They got lots of angry phone calls. But yes. It's actually a part of their contract. They can do that to us, but in talking with our rep, we would go through an extensive education process before we rolled anything like that out to our residents.
So hold it. They wouldn't send the bill to the resident. They would bill the city the $1, and then we would have to try to collect from the
I don't even
resident.
know how we would.
If it happened, we'll wait until
Yeah.
it happens. It was just an interesting mail. I just remember my wife saying, "You won't believe what we just got. They want $1."
Right.
Oh, you got it too?
Yeah.
Me too.
You got one too?
Oh, yeah.
You know, and they told us only a few people got them, but as extensively as it's happened on council and others, I think it was more than what they let on.
Oh, I never got that.
Good, oh, good for
That's
you.
not
Good for
overfill
you.
your can,
Not
Scott.
overflowing. So anyway, if it comes back, would you like to have a discussion on this, or would you like it to be a consent item? And if there was a consent item or a discussion, what would you prefer to have this brought back as?
I think we need to discuss it in public a little bit, because we're raising or potentially raising a lot of fees, and they all add up over time. Plus, people are getting hit with increased fuel costs and inflation, and, I mean, I understand all of this, but, you know, I think we need to be real open and transparent. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay. So transparency would be, we'd like this as a discussion item.
Absolutely. Are there any questions, any more details council needs to be able to make the decision, I guess?
Is there any type of regulation or limitation as to how much we can increase the rate? Because, right, we have to be aware of the challenges of today's economy, but at the same time, the money's got to come from somewhere. If it doesn't come from the dollar extra here, it's going to come from another fund. So, I mean, regrettably, we need to raise it. Why can't we just, the rate which is allowed for inflation, which probably cover us for a couple of years, and not have to have annual increases? Well,
So you could, by law, you could go with that little bit of a buffer, but fees cannot exceed a reasonable estimate of the cost to provide the service. So you can't, you know, $50,000 for, you know, a year's worth of service is a relatively small adjustment, and it accounts for that, some of those inflationary costs. Just picking a number of, you know, we'll just charge you $20 a month for your garbage, and we'll figure out how that shakes out in the end is not something the city could do. You
So
have
we
to tie
could
it to
do,
a
like
number.
for that first line, we could do $11.08, and that would be reasonable.
Yes, that's reasonably tied to it. That way you don't have to do the rate adjustment every year unless something horrible
I mean, that could
happens.
cover us, that could cover us for a year or two.
A couple of years, hopefully.
Right, so that just seems like the logical step to take, because it would avoid the hardship and the pain of
And Tim, what we'll
asking
do is
for-
we'll bring this back at a council meeting, we can discuss on that reasonability. of what
Specifics.
rate. Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
Does that sound good?
Thank you.
Okay. We will now move on to the Mountain Ridge Park item. I think we were hoping that.
Can we take a break first?
Yes.
Because my daughter came to hear garbage discussion.
Okay, so
She's unimpressed.
how long do we need to have a break for?
5 minutes.
Okay, it's 9:19. Let's go ahead till 9:25.
She also brought homemade ice cream if anybody wants it.
Okay, that's the other reason for a break.
We need a 10-minute break.
10-minute break. We now are going till 9:30.
Sophie, you're up. There's 4 kinds.
Where's ice cream coming from?
There's vanilla and chocolate and lime and raspberry. Okay, if there's not enough ice cream, blame Sophie.
Thank you, Sophie. Can you also stand up? and-
Thank you, Sophie.
Gotta get that room for the ice cream.
I highly recommend the lime. Rob, did you just walk by my ice cream? I'm super offended. I don't know. What's in the unmarked? Mystery flavored.
9:31. We'd like to go ahead and start back our work session. Brittany, thank you. That's a nice treat. So with that, we will now come back, and our next discussion item is Mountain Ridge Park. I know we were hoping to have Brian Braithwaite here, but it does not appear he's here.
This is Nathan and me, and this is Nathan's part, so we're gonna just fake this until he gets back.
Well, you had a bid awarding today, right?
What's that?
You had a bid opening today.
Yes, so for what you can see up on the screen here is phase 1. So the purplish, does it look purple to you? Purplish, bluish?
Yeah.
Meaning the frontage to the park, piping the ditch, working on the road, adding the sidewalk in, and then partial parking is the...
So it's not the red area?
Those are bid alternatives, correct, Andy? And do you want to speak more on the opening?
Yeah, so the bid, we got a bid for all of it, but in order to allow us to make the most use of our monies, right, we divided it up into 3 phases. So the main bid, or the primary bid, was all the utility services so that we could do the bathrooms and then all the improvements that are shown in blue and kind of all the frontage landscaping. And then the 2 alternatives, alternative 1 was the eastern parking, we're on the right side of the screen that we're looking at, and then alternative 2 was the western parking in the red. So collectively, the bids, if we awarded that total area, that was $2.1 million.
For all 3 sections?
Okay, that's all 3 together. Yeah. All 3 together.
Okay, so this is if you recall, we revised the playground. This is what the revised playground area looks like. I thought the close-up would be good. Next one, please, Erin. So you'll see as Andy was mentioning, you'll see the different bid areas. So if you're looking at phase 1, which is, as he mentioned, basically the blue, alt bid alt 2 is on the western side, and bid alt 1 is on the eastern side. That's what we got today. So the remaining major elements that we have include a playground at $2 million, restrooms $400. Now we expect that cost to go up. If we did all 8 pickleball courts, these are costs from October. All 8 courts are estimated at $750. If you add lighting and shade, those would be additional costs. Sports fields is about $1.5 million. The perimeter walkway with furniture, meaning benches and such, is $275. These are all estimates. 3 pavilions at $350, and remaining landscaping at $450. So our estimated total with these numbers is $7.8 million. Our October estimate was 7.9, so we expect these to go up a little bit.
Is this sports field the 2 soccer and baseball?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't have, that's just for multi-use fields. That doesn't include the cost for baseball. Next one. So our estimated revenue is about $5.4 million. We have 1.4 in the Spring Creek park sales. That's the entire proceeds from Spring Creek. 358 from a sell property for expansion of the storage units, hideaway storage. We have $400,000 from Dry Creek property sale to accommodate the Dry Creek Lake. Street tree count, we've talked about that before. It's about 95,700. Projects portions of the project that we feel can be taking from enterprise funds or B&C Road eligible. Those are 2, so that's a separate revenue source. We've had a donation from Patterson Foundation, I guess that's what they call themselves, I don't know. We just call it the Patterson.
Is that the 10,000 that's in the foundation?
No,
Is this another
that's
10,000?
separate. I believe it's separate. I don't know, I'd have to look.
Because they donated 10,000 for pickleball courts
Okay.
in the past. It sits in the foundation. Plus, there's another $20,000 for the playground in the foundation.
Yeah. Okay. And as Tyler mentioned earlier, in ARPA funds, that's the $2.2 million. And then, as we discussed, when the audit was presented, we have some one-time revenue over expenses from last fiscal year of 625. That's where we get the $5.4 million.
Is it 625, at one time we've talked about doing the park maintenance building. Is that taking the fund out of the park maintenance building, or is that still separate from that fund?
Park maintenance building is separate,
Okay.
but we did not take out the playground from for Highland Glen Park, so 150 less.
Okay.
I forgot about that. Next one. Non-city revenue sources, we do have a $20,000 donation for a swing. We've heard of commitments up to $1 million for playground. When the playground was expanded, the decision was made to set a $2 million budget with $1 million provided by the city, $1 million provided by donations. One of the things that we did do, though, is make sure in our funding that we could actually afford a $2 million project, just in case funding did not come through. They'll talk more about funding later on. Other sources include surf, soccer, and the public-private partnerships, surf, soccer, and with Jack Christopherson for baseball. Next one. So in summary, if we do all of phase one, it costs us $2.1 million, a playground another $2 million, a restroom $400 to $500, somewhere in there. That would give, it's a big restroom. So for top three, we're calling those the top three. Total is about $4.5 million, which gives us about $800 to $900 in discretionary. That doesn't include contingency. That doesn't include additional landscaping. That doesn't include grading, things like that. So you probably plan on about half that for additional amenities and be safe. Our feeling is that with our existing revenue source, we can't do the entire park without cooperation and donations from others. Okay, next one. Thank you. So one of the questions tonight we'd like the council to discuss as we go through the bids and vet them is, do we want to proceed with all three phases? Do we want to proceed with just two? If it's just two, because our focus has been on the playground, we would suggest that we do the western and not the eastern bid alternate. Does that make sense? Okay. So a little bit.
Andy, from your experience and from others, usually when you have everyone on site, isn't it more cost effective? I mean, I assume that's what it's going to be, to get it done than to try to come back and say, hey, this alternative bid, because that might creep up by the time they have to deploy and get everyone on. What type of savings do you think? I mean, is there savings if we do all three, or is there, and what type of savings would there be if we said, hey, we'll do the purple, and then we'll do the one by the playground, but not the one by the pickleball? What's been the experience with that?
To answer your question, twofold. Number one, I know seems like all we've talked about tonight is inflation. That keeps coming up, but the increased costs if you wait. So there's that element, the inflation element of just we waited a couple of years and now things cost more. But also, to get to the heart of what you're asking, you definitely do pay less to catch it while you're there with the one project. So say that one on the right, little parking lot, it came in about 400,000. I don't remember exactly, but if you were to look at that as a separate project, just no inflation, et cetera, but just a separate project, you're probably going to pay, at least another 20% or so higher, just picking that off as a separate project versus the greater, larger project.
So it makes sense to me if we can get the fundraising going that we ought to just build this. But just, can you quickly tell me about a $400,000 restroom? Because you could build a house for that.
Used to. That is the same restroom, if you're familiar with Highland Glen Park, the restroom that is by the pond, that is what we paid for that restroom. It's a concrete building. We have individual doors versus
We paid
like a
$400,000
traditional.
for that one?
Huh?
We paid $400,000 for it?
And we got the cheap one, remember?
That wasn't one of the cheaper ones, but yeah.
Yeah.
But this has built into it some things where it makes it less likely to be vandalized, or if it is.
Yeah, so stainless steel.
Right.
Fixtures.
And the individual rooms, you didn't have to worry, is it decided on gender at all or anything that way, or?
No. I think we do, I don't remember what we do down there, Jeff. We did label them down there, so we can label down there. But that is 2 handicap restrooms also, if I remember correctly.
I mean, if you look at fundraising, here's where it's gonna be hard to fundraise. It's really hard unless you give a person a parking spot dedicated to them, the parking, to probably fundraise for parking. And unless there's something really unique about your bathroom, it would probably be hard to fundraise. I'm not sure there's a lot of people who want to fundraise for a bathroom. I mean, I'm just saying, your playground, your pickleball, some of the other things. And I guess we could put names on stalls. This was donated by such and such.
Green donated by Mayor Thompson. Oh, no, Mayor Ostler, sorry.
Mayor man.
Yes.
You're sitting on the mayor throne.
Yes.
Actually, maybe there is a donation coming. This is the mayor's throne.
Please do it.
We'll go to all the mayors. You want your mayor's throne? Anyway. Okay. Maybe we just found a unique way. So anyway, okay. So what is it we're needing information on now?
So for us to bring this back to council, we need to, and for either next week or May 3rd, we need to have some direction on what the phasing you want to go through. If you want us to do it all phase 1 and the 2 bid alternatives, or do you want us to do something different?
And where, on this rendering, there's no baseball?
Correct. That's because that's coming next. We're in the process of deciding baseball, but we haven't gone forward and changed the construction drawings for baseball. We haven't even changed the construction drawings for the new park layout yet, until we know exactly what. We didn't want to pay more money to change the drawings without knowing for sure what we're doing.
Got it, thank you.
I thought we had a drawing from Blue Line last night with the baseball in it.
We do.
It looked like it was hand-drawn.
Yes, yes. It's not anybody could construct anything off of, so.
So what you're saying, these were the construction drawings you gave for bidding?
Correct.
So council, now this has to still come back, it's gonna be next week on the agenda?
Next week, we can pull
Is
it
there
off
any
for next week.
recommendation on if you want it to be blue area? Do you want it to be both red, one red? Any instruction maybe, or do you want to just discuss it next week? Or is there any direction what you're thinking?
Does Brian have anything to add?
On the parking and the bid?
No, I think you need to bid it all personally, but it's dependent on your donations. I mean, we sat in the room last night and we had a donor there said, I will definitely give you $500,000. And so, I mean, if we have some firm commitments from if we decide to do surf and the baseball with Christofferson, you have almost enough money to get things going, right?
Yeah, we think we
Okay.
can do with, outside of donations, with our existing funding source, we can do playground, restroom, and what you see in front of you.
Uh-huh. A large parking lot for a restroom.
I agree
Visit our
with,
restroom.
I agree with Scott. I think if we can do it all with some donations, we should try to get it completed.
So I guess, Nathan, now let's assume we don't get any donations other than, and let's, and we'll have Brian come talk. Let's assume we can get the 2 soccer fields, a baseball diamond, and we have the $500,000 donation, plus when we have the other $30,000. What we currently feel comfortable, there's others that are talking about donating. What can we get done? Is it everything but pickleball?
Basically. And it may be a little bit minor than, a little bit reduction in landscaping or sidewalks or something, don't know for sure, but basically everything you see there but pickleball.
Isn't that interesting? This started out as a pickleball,
Yeah.
as kind of trying to fund it, and that's kind of me. And it doesn't mean that we can't go back out to that pickleball group or families and say, hey, are you interested in donating towards pickleball? And we have to come up with what we would do if there's a little, memorable, corner marker in the back or so. Any other direction, council, on what to do here? And then we probably want to have Brian come up and kind of share with us a little bit of his conversation with donors and that. Anything else you need before we have Brian come up?
No, I forget the next one. Oh, maintenance.
Want to talk maintenance costs or?
Yeah, we need to, because that's something, the ongoing maintenance costs, what do we anticipate?
So we can talk about that before or after, Brian, up to you.
Let's do it after. Let's hear something
Let's have
positive
Brian.
first.
Brian, would you, we have Mr. Braithwaite here, who's on our Parks Committee as our chair, who's been spending a lot of time on this park. We'd like to now turn some time over to him for him to talk.
Thank you, council, for letting me come. I dressed up just for you guys today. I haven't had to wear a suit in so long on a weekday. It's been awesome.
Is your mic on?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know exactly what you've talked about. My suggestion in what Kurt said, Bahr said, just a few minutes ago is really apropos to what I think that we need to be looking at. It's easy to fundraise for a pickleball court. It's easy to fundraise for the playground and some of those kinds of things. It's really difficult for the restroom and the parking lot and the curb and gutter and things like that. And so if we have enough that we can get all of that infrastructure done, and one of the things that Paul said yesterday is, I'm wanting this park, and I don't need my money put into a specific area. I want the park to be done, and that's awesome. I mean, you just can't find any better donor than somebody like that who just cares to get the community, to raise the community. And so we can use his money to help get the excitement and get things moving and get that infrastructure in place to where we go to some people who are really big advocates for pickleball or some of these other types of things and get them to donate for those, because those are the things that people get excited about, wanting to see that, not the parking lot. So I would strongly suggest that if we can get close enough to doing the pickleball, we do the whole thing, and then we go after these donors and see what we can get. Because some of them are going to want to do the pavilion, and some of them are going to want to do the playground or something like that, slap their name on it, and brand it to them.
So one question I'd have for the council is, and maybe, is the council okay if there was, let's say we have 3 pavilions, that we go out to the residents, and that we would have naming rights for pavilions, or do we want to, I think that's really important. Are we doing naming rights for pavilions, meaning that it would be, the Scott Smith Pavilion, I'm just using your name as that, or is it something we would rather have just a placard in the pavilion donated by the Smith Family Foundation, or Or is there any feedback you've received from donors, or is there any feedback from the council on how we should be approaching that type of donor?
So I would ask that you give the flexibility. I would do a plaque and tell them that that's what it is, so that we've got something to present and talk about. But if they would like something more than that, have the flexibility as an organization to say, if they really want it on the structure itself, then let us have that flexibility to do it if it's something big. But I'd like to present an idea. And if we'd prefer to go with the plaques on the building, then let's at least start with that. But I'd prefer it being just things, the brick wall that has the names of who contributed and something like that.
So you would have like a central monument sign or something that has the following people donated
Yes.
to our park.
You're not thinking that specific pavilion that maybe they donated with a little plaque in the pavilion area?
Well, I'm saying do the monument and have that as what is presented. And if they say, well, I'd rather have it on the pavilion and named for the pavilion, then let us have the flexibility of saying, negotiate and say, yeah, we'll let you do that. Because you kind of, again, it's always easier to think, when you think abstract, it's one thing, you can't get people to commit. When you show them something, then it puts it real for them. And so I'd rather have a design to be able to say, this is what we're going to do. And if they were thinking of the other thing, have the flexibility to say, okay, we'll let you for the pavilion or, the toilet or whatever the specific thing. But for the most part, we'd just put them on a single monument for the whole thing. I think most of them aren't going to be that big, and so that would be an easier thing to manage. That would be a suggestion. But again, if we'd rather go the other way, let's go the other way. But let's commit to it so that we have a design that we can talk to them about.
I think you could go either way, but it may be when you present it to the donors, and they may just say, hey, we want our name on the pavilion or whatever. But to me, I think aesthetically, it's just nice to have a monument wall with these are the people that, I don't know.
They even talked, the fundraising committee even talked about, because we have pavers going all around the, I think, playground and grass area to have, you can donate it X amount and get a paver with your family name on it. They talked about that.
Did you talk about that already?
Mm-mm.
No.
So we haven't talked about any of the fundraising.
So really, an important piece to this whole thing is getting community buy-in. And one of the things we talked about yesterday that I think is really important for something like this is to get the community to be able to buy something, so every family in the community could do something. When your name is on something, when you go over and clean up a park, when you go and work on something that's tied to the community, you have buy-in and you're less likely to vandalize it, you're more likely to turn in kids that will or try to convince them not to do it. And so the more individuals we have contributing to this, the more likely it's going to stay nice, because everybody's going to want it to stay nice. It's part of me. It's got my name on it. It's got my family name on it. And so I think that's a really important piece for us to have. We can decide, we can limit it. We talked about, having 20,000 of those, or 10,000 or 5,000 or 2,000 or something like that, and having a certain price. So maybe not everybody can get a brick for $2, or maybe we want to go, $2 brick. But the concept is, the more people that we can get to contribute in, the better this is going to be, the more pride in ownership.
I agree. And I think it's good to get going. I think we need to get something in the newsletter and have an easy way for people to donate.
Yes. So, and it would be through the foundation, because that's another cool idea of, take a tax write-off so the parents are excited and the kids put their name on it.
Can I jump in a second? Aaron, I put a couple PDFs in that file if you would open them. So when we were originally looking at the 27 court idea, we had a couple concepts put together for a donor area. And she'll pull these up real quick and you can kind of see these real quick.
Can we also, Nathan, have some kind of an easy process or some kind of a process for in-kind donation? Wes was asking me about that again.
Yes.
For like electrical.
Yes. So what we...
How they could get it donated.
What
we just have to have it defined well enough that they can do it.
That we exclude it from the anyways.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
There's a way to do that. So here's the general idea, kind of walk through it. Landscape, you can just go to the big one. Yeah, there you go. So it's kind of a monolith type thing where the names are etched into the stone or the rock. Can you bring up, yeah, she'll bring up another one. You can kind of see different areas where this came from, where it was kind of inspired by. The reason we like it etched into rock is vandalism. A lot harder to vandalize than if you have something with somebody's names with individual letters. Does that make sense? Mounted on something?
The only
Or
thing
flags could be pried off, yeah.
Yes,
my only other concern when I look at that, I see that as $100,000 being spent to do that.
right. Again, this is concept, right? But this is kind of an idea that you want to do the next one too? The final one? Should have, yeah. You're good. Oop, wrong one.
Could be Highland Stonehenge.
Yeah, no, there you go. There's 3. So anyways, this is just give you a type of idea of what could be done. Now, obviously, we have budget and cost controls and all that kind of stuff we got to look at. But, our idea, general idea is the same, which is to have something that's cool and recognizes folks rather than something in the back and nobody sees and pays attention to.
And I think we'd have to be very specific. Is it any donation you name on the rock? Is there a certain dollar amount? Do you do it? This is, bronze, gold, silver, I don't know, some recommendations that way.
Now, I will
If you go over
add,
to the cemetery, you can see the pavers that they did over there.
Yeah.
And I would suggest that we do something like that for
Smaller donations.
For the broad,
Yeah.
for the broad, anybody wants to get a piece of this.
that's funny, because I was going to say our paver donation wasn't that great of a success, but.
Well, no, and some of it has to get out there.
It wasn't, but it's a little easier to manage.
It is, to
that
get in the
type of
ground,
thing.
to add
Just
on.
saying.
Yeah.
You can
I
keep
think-
having people add to it.
Yes, I think the next step really is to sit down and outline what the plan is and what it, what different levels, how we do it, and go from there.
So did we talk about the meeting yesterday?
We have
No,
not
we
talked
haven't
anything
talked
about
anything.
SURF or Chad Christopherson.
So one of the things that we talked about yesterday that was really important for us to get a little bit more clarity on is what the park hours, because one of the important pieces of having this park is to have it feel like it's a community park. And when you bring somebody in and they lock up the fields, then it's the feeling is, well, that's Surf's Park and things like that. As we talked about it, we obviously are going to create a grass area, and even if it wasn't surf, if we put grass in there and didn't have surf as part of this, somebody else would come in and rent it, because we do not have enough fields to be able to accommodate the youth in Highland, period. So even if we did it on our own and it wasn't surf, somebody else is going to be renting it the whole time. So as we talked about this, we were able to work with surf and do some give and take on how much they would actually use it. And their biggest concern is if they're not actually on the field, so they wanted to lock it up. So they basically asked for every hour that the sun was up. And it wasn't really because they wanted it and were going to use it every hour the sun was up. It was they wanted to make sure that some other organization didn't see it open and all of a sudden try to come in and start using it. And so they wanted some clarity on, if we don't use it, will it be open to the community, or is it going to be open for other organized soccer or lacrosse or football or whatever other team could then come in and use it? Because any coach that drives around and sees an empty field and sees a consistent pattern of an empty field, they're going to immediately try to run in there and start using it. And so we were talking about how do we accommodate them, let the residents use it anytime they're not on there, but not let an organized sporting group get in there and tear it up. And I think that we came up with some really good ideas where basically the field is not rented So you can't come in and schedule anything on it. It's first come, first serve. And we mark the field to make it clear that organized sports, and we were talking about wording, and we're going to continue to work on that, but basically, if you're a player and you pay money, or if you have a coach, you know, a dad walks in or a mom walks in and they got a big bag of, you know, soccer balls or whatever it is, you know, if you're that organized, then that's what we're saying, you can't go out there. If you want to do a game, everybody runs out and plays a game, you know, every once in a while, that's not prohibited. That's not something that anybody's going to be monitoring. It's really that organized league wants a consistent schedule, and so they're going to be trying to come all the time, and that's what we're trying to make sure that doesn't come on. But a pickup game of flag football or the neighbors or anything like that, it's not you can't play soccer or play football or do those kinds of things. It just can't be some other paid team that's some organized team that's doing it. Was that fairly close to what we talked about?
Nathan, did you have a slide about the
Kim?
timing
Is that pretty close?
that we talked about?
About the timing
Like
or
when
what it looks
we went
like?
through today about
I
what?
did not create one of
Maybe
those.
you can give it.
So I tried to print this off, that's why I was late, because my computer locked up on me, and in fact, it was locked up until like 2 minutes ago, so I can actually read it. But the concept, I'll just read it really quick. The concept is in March, April, and May, in the spring, and in the fall, September, October, and November, they would have the field used. And when we talk about used, they go out and mow it, and they're fertilizing it. So some of the time is not just practice time or game time, it's actually maintaining the field. So, and when we talked about maintenance earlier, and we're going to talk about that afterwards, these soccer fields are going to be maintained by SURF, so that's not a responsibility for us. Everything else is, the baseball diamond would be our responsibility, but not this. So Monday through Thursday, they basically 3 p.m. until dark, okay? And when they're not on there, we call it priority usage, okay? So if they needed it, they could come on. If you're a family, you could be out there. If you don't see them, you go out there and picnic or fly kites or kick a soccer ball, do whatever you want. Friday, there will be no
organized sports.
No organized, yeah, even for surf. Surf won't be there on Fridays. So that was the concern, is if Friday's open, coaches drive by and they see that every Friday there's no one there, then they're going to try to go start practicing on that. And they're saying that won't work for them, but we can leave it open for residents. There are times where rain or something like that, so they may not do a Tuesday and would use a Friday. So it's open, that's why they get priority, but for the most part, Fridays would be open to residents and just kind of a downtime for the neighbors as well. Saturday, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. The last game would start at 2 p.m. So that would be 3:30, 4 o'clock. It would end, and from that time on, the rest of the evening would be residents. Sunday, residents can have it all day long. So Fridays and Sundays, it's all day. Saturdays, it's in the afternoon. And Monday through Thursday, it's in the morning. So those are spring and fall. Okay? During the summer, they have a 3 to 4 week where they rest the field. So nobody's playing on it. And that means that they don't have any organized games of any kind or practices. So they sod it, they seed it, they do whatever they can to get it, the turf, because it gets torn up in the spring when it's muddy and stuff. So they're trying to get it a better field. They don't care if other people are on there during that time, as long as it isn't a consistent pounding on it. Going in and playing some soccer, the kids playing soccer on it, it's not going to be roped off. They don't think that they would do enough damage to cause any problems. If I'd misunderstood you guys, then fill me in.
During that 3 to 4 weeks, it's unorganized sports again. It can be any family reunion that pops up and play on the fields, yes. But it's not organized sports.
Right. Always, that's the key element, is no organized sports can be on this ever during this time period, okay, on these 2 fields. And then June, July, and August, those are the summer months where the kids are out and they're really going to want to do this. So this is a little bit convoluted, so I'm just going to go through it quick so you can have an idea, but I'll print this off and I can email it to you so you can actually look at it. Monday through Thursday at 7 a.m. to 1 on 2 fields, for both fields. The reason why I say that is because we're going to start breaking it up to where there's going to be a field more or less open all the time. So on Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m., both fields. 5 p.m. to 9, they're going to come in for one field. So in the evening, at least one field will always be open for kids to be able to use. On Saturday, one of the fields will be open. One of them will be used from 8 to noon, and the other field won't be used at all during the day. So the last game starts at noon. So this is during the summer.
So during the summer,
So they don't.
pretty well anytime after 1 p.m., there'll always be one field open.
So on Saturday, one field will be open all day. The second field both fields will be open from about 1 o'clock on during the summer. So they don't play games, they only do practicing in the summertime. They play their games, they have their season in the spring and in the fall, but not during the summer. And then again, Sunday's open, and then there's a 3 to 4 week time period. And they can't tell us in advance because it's tied mostly to weather. So if it's a really wet season, then it may be pushed a little bit later. If it's wet earlier, but they see it's drying up, then they may have it later. You know, it depends on what the season is. But it's mostly tied around how wet the season is and how much play they had in the spring that's tied to it. So they can give it time to heal itself. So that's the concept. They're quite open and willing to allow things, and anytime they're not there, they have no issue with families or anybody else doing anything. But if they come and want to use it, need it, they have priority access to it, so they could kick a family off if they needed to. The other thing is that the baseball diamond doesn't take up a whole square, so there's a corner out in center field. If you square it off, that's always going to be open. So they could move their stuff over into that area and still be able to play. So,
It's up
so
there
if you
for
look at it there, the center field, that area past the fence in center field, that will always be open. So kids could be playing there.
And then they'll move the fields where you have, see the two soccer fields. In the spring, it might be one area, and then they might move them closer, you know, so it might even shift a little bit more, so there's more room on that side by the baseball diamond, because they'll move it around as it goes in the fall.
So the issue is they have their goalie boxes, those get trampled the most. So they like to shift the whole field to where that goalie box is now kind of in the corner of the field. And so they've shifted it over the width of a goalie field. So they restripe it, and that allows that piece to heal while they're continuing to play. So they'll shift those around enough that they can actually continue to play all season. So that's what we talked about here with these guys. Any questions on that?
Yeah, and then, so what about the length of the contract?
So the length of the contract, they want 10 years of usable. And so in the contract, they put in 11 years because it's going to take a year for this to be built out. So they asked for 10 years for use.
So do you have an approximate idea how much they're basically donating with this?
So we calculated out so that they're paying for all the infrastructure, and I'm basing it on what the costs were and adding on about 50%. We figure it's close to between $200,000 and $300,000 that they'll be paying. If we get Chad to do some of the work himself, then we would be able to use that cash to use it somewhere else. And so, you know, and if he's not doing it, these guys could possibly do in-kind donation with people that they know to be able to do that same kind of.
What do you think it costs per field to put in? Like, you know, Nathan, you had down here 1.5 million for those 3 fields. Are you thinking it's 500,000 per field to put in?
We didn't get that specific. We just did general cost for that area for grass, the walkway and so forth.
So I can send you the specific numbers that we have for what it costs for the, so what they're paying for is they're bringing in topsoil. So they're going to level it. So that we do the rough grading. So they're going to do the final grading. They're going to bring in topsoil, a minimum of 4 inches of topsoil that they're going to bring in. They're going to put sod on the field. They're going to put the irrigation or pay for the irrigation system to be put in. And then one last thing that we didn't talk about before, they asked, and this is the same thing that Chad was concerned about, having four-wheelers go out on the field. They are asking to put in a fence that will restrict access onto the fields. So it's not a gated kind of thing, but if you look at the baseball diamond, if you take that at the top and you extend the first base line, that fence that's right there, if you just extend it all the way over to the fence, so it just goes all the way west is that direction. And if you took that all the way clear to the fence, it would have a couple openings through that fence that you could walk through. So it's channeling people and keeping it so that four-wheelers don't come out onto the field. That's one of their fears. And Chad was very anxious about making sure that he had a fence because he saw what they did down in Mitchell Hollow. Yeah. So he wants the same thing. And then on the left field fence, the third base fence, we would take that all the way down to the resident fence also with an opening on the trail. So if you're on the trail, you'd be able to just go through it. But it's that kind of opening. It's not a gated thing where they can shut it and lock it off and say, you know, we're going to fix our field today. No, it's just to restrict certain kinds of things. So we talked about putting a bollard in the trail that would keep it so it'd be a little bit smaller so you walk around it. If you're a pedestrian or a bike, you can go around it easy, but if you're a four-wheeler, you wouldn't be able to get through. We haven't gotten that specific, but that's the whole concept, is to make it, you can feel like you can walk in and it's not an issue, but it's keeping those entities that could do more damage. And so across the top, there would be an opening, you know, over by the baseball diamond, between the baseball diamond and the first field, and then between the two fields, and then clear over to the side where the trail goes through, so you wouldn't have. So it'd be that kind of thing. That's where the openings would be.
Excuse me.
So I bring that up because that would be another cost that they would cover, would be the fencing beyond what the baseball diamond would have. So they would run it past that on both corners. So those are the costs that they're doing. So whatever the cost is when we calculate it, that's how we can find out. When we get a bid, that's what they're paying for. So the rough grading is the only piece that we will have, that we will do before they take it over. And that's what I took those numbers from when we did this before, and I plugged those in.
Any other questions for Brian on this? We haven't talked about the baseball, but just specifically on the soccer and surf soccer agreement. Any feedback, concerns?
I think it sounds reasonable. I think it sounds.
We're making progress.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
What we're pushing for really hard right now is to get them to lock down exactly what it is so that staff knows how to work the numbers, because they're bidding for the whole thing, but they need to know how it's going to be done. And if Chad's going to be able to bring in his people, they got to know that that is a module that they can pull out, or what else is covered, and if it's not covered, where are they going to get the money for it? And that's what we're really trying to lock down right now. For the baseball diamond, Chad has offered to put the diamond in, and he's given us a limit on the top, but we're not quite as far along. We've talked about the things that he needs to have in there, but he's got to get clarity on where he's at on that whole thing. And so we've written it up to what we believe that he's asked or he's offered in this thing and what we're asking for. But he's got to clarify that. But what generally he wants is he wants the fence in. We would put the turf in. Well, let me rephrase that. He's willing to pay up to a certain amount. And so if the turf is part of that, the infield is part of that, the fencing and all of the bleachers and the dugouts, and if all of that fit in, which if he's willing to do the whole amount that he has mentioned, then that would all be covered. But if for some reason it's less, then we would have to come up with some of those pieces. But right now it would cover all of the grass, it would cover the irrigation, it would cover the infield, fencing, dugouts, the the backstop.
Bleachers?
I didn't have a price for bleachers, so I'm not sure that it would cover the bleachers, but
They usually have bleachers, Kim, at like these, Newport
but we're planning on having some here.
lights.
Just the small aluminum set. If you're familiar with what's over here at Heritage Park,
Yeah.
it would be like those or the ones right next door to, on the Mountain Ridge Junior High Park.
But the field would not be lit.
What's that?
But not the big, tall athletic lights.
Oh, you said lights?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were talking about bleachers too. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I know, I asked about both.
So lights are up to you guys. We've told the baseball and the soccer people there's no lights on their fields. So the only lights we're talking about would be, unless you guys are willing to accept that.
I don't think it's good for
The neighbors would be
nearby
unhappy if we had
residents.
lights out there. And so pickleball, I think there should be lights. In the parking lot, there should be lights. The Bowery, there should be lights. The pavilion. Other than that, I wouldn't put any more lights than that. But that's up to you guys. I mean, I'll do
Brittany and I
whatever you
want
ask.
to go and play a nighttime game of baseball, so
You want lights.
I don't know if the expense is worth it for what we need it for. Yeah,
It is fun, but the neighbors,
yeah, and I think
I
the
played
neighbors
in
might-
Orem in some of the softball leagues there, and I'll tell you, those neighbors, if you go 1 minute past that hour, man, they would complain to the city. So, it's hard to blame them, because you gotta put a lot of power out.
Well, and if you
But,
put lights on pickleball, I'll tell you at Harvey Park, when it hits 10, those really just shut off. You have no control. They're off.
and I think that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's the right way to handle it. But I think I think lights would be good for that,
For the pickleball.
for the pickleball
Yeah.
and the pavilion and
So,
parking lot.
of your donors, here's how I look at it. If we don't work with Sir Soccer or with Chad Christopherson, we probably won't get these fields, and we just don't have the funding for it. Chad, my understanding is asking for a 3-year commitment for 2 times a week.
That is what was discussed, and there was nodding, but every time you get into an agreement, this is with SURF or with him or anybody else, when the paper is put in front of you and you have to get very specific, things change. So this was a verbal discussion. It may not change at all. That was the discussion at that point. And that's why we have to get it in writing so that staff has an ability to act on it. We know what we're really dealing with.
Any questions on the fields at all? So Brian, at one time you were really involved with the pickleball when it was the bigger courts. Was there a lot of donors that were saying they were willing to donate? Right now we're saying it's going to appear to be about $100,000 for a court. Did we have very many donors come and say they would donate for a specific court and what they were asking for, or did it not get that far?
We had, again, this is always that verbal commitment. And one of the things that's really important for us as an organization is when you get the momentum and everybody sees that it's really happening, then the donations start happening, because nobody wants to be the first one to ante up, but they also don't want to miss the bus. And so once they see that bus rolling and they know it's rolling, they want to get on board and they want to do it. So yes, we did, but the amount of the pickleball courts back then were half the price that we're talking about now. And we were talking to several businesses that were willing to do it, but we were also talking about having the tournament, which would have given them name recognition during those tournament times. Some of them cared about that, some of them not so much. And so it's really hard to state we had them locked in because we didn't have the momentum, but they verbally had committed yes. And a couple of them didn't need the tournament. They were happy to do it without that.
And you know the names that we can go approach again?
Mm-hmm.
Wes had a great idea at one point. He said we should print a big sign with a QR code and plant it in that field. Like future home of the park.
That's a great idea. One
And
that you
then
can pull up your camera from the road and
take a picture and donate.
20-foot sign.
Of course, a passenger, as we talked about UDOT earlier with distracted driving.
Well, we'll put right next to it, or actually when you click on it, it'll say, please don't do this when you're driving. It'll flash on your screen.
We'll just say don't.
And then Scott will put up those lights, the signs, the portable electric signs.
I think we should say future home of Walmart.
Future home of what?
Walmart.
Walmart.
We might want, that is something when we're going to start going, we do have to get signage out here to let people know this is a future park site, we're taking donations, you have to do QR code. I mean, that's part of the whole inertia. It's a whole marketing
Yes.
campaign to get going on this.
Yep.
And so, okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you. Now on to the ever-ending.
Actually, there is one other thing. There is one other donor that we are pursuing. I'm not comfortable that it's one that we can trust at this point in time, but we're still talking to them. But this is one that they're talking up to $500,000, and it's going to be a little bit more red tape. So it's out there, it's been discussed, it's been offered, but it's verbal, and those, we all know how those work. So, but just so you know, there is that one, that there is clarity on who it is and what we're trying to get, unlike some of these pickleball courts where we're just saying, could we find somebody that would be interested? This is an organization that said, yes, we do these kinds of things, yes, we are interested, but it's verbal, and so we're going to get clarity on that. All right?
Thank you. I think it's going to be amazing.
Okay, Mayor and Council, continuing on with the discussion of maintenance costs. And please know that these numbers are preliminary and they will change depending on what partnerships we entered into as well. For example, I have grass included in here, right? Grass field maintenance, assuming that this city was going to maintain. And again, these are preliminary. As we've nailed down what is going to be in the park, they'll become more final. But just to give you an idea how I looked at this, Josh and I worked together to do, okay, let's divide up the park into different areas to try and figure out what each area is going to cost us. And so grass was one, right, thinking of sprinkler maintenance and mowing and fertilizing and everything that goes into that and the personnel costs associated with that. We did pavilions and restrooms. So grass, we did essentially what it costs us right now per acre to maintain grass, and then we applied that to Mountain Ridge. When looking at pavilion restroom type maintenance, we looked at our current budget for those type of activities and said it'll probably be 20% of the budget just because it's going to be a really large park, really heavily used. In looking at the parking lot, we said, okay, so ideally to keep this parking lot in good shape, we should do a surface treatment and restriping every 10 years. That is not done in all of our parking lots, but again, this was kind of a best case scenario if we could establish that. And then looking at the playground elements themselves, so the actual physical structures in the playgrounds, the two finalists that the council's currently deciding between, they have different time periods where different items go out of warranty, right? About a 3-year marker, a 5-year marker, and a 10-year marker. So we looked at those for some estimates.
Why would the warranty add to cost?
I'm sorry?
Why
Not the warranty itself, but at year 5,
repairs.
yes. Okay. When the swing breaks, we now have to pay for it out of pocket.
Okay.
So yeah, that was what was taken into account. Playground surface, we talked to a couple vendors and they said you're going to want to do surface treatments, just like roads actually. You do surface treatments, so you probably are going to need an initial one after 2 to 3 years for just the excitement and all of the initial use, and then after that it's probably about every 5 to 7 years that you'll need to do that to maintain the quality there. Pickleball courts need resurfacing. American Forks told us they've had to do theirs about every 4 years is the lifespan they get on that. And then the shade structures, as that was a big question of council when you were talking to the different vendors, the warranties expire on those about after 5 years. And so I'm trying to build those in. And then also some inflationary components there. Again, these numbers are rough, and it does include everything. So beginning year, we're looking at about $43,000 to maintain the park. And also, that does include grass, as I said. And then as you look at the lifespan of the park, so I projected out 20 years, assuming we would need to replace the playground at about that mark. If you look on average, it ends up being an 8% increase to that $43,000 per year. That counts for a 3% increase on O&M costs. And then as the different elements go out of warranty, then those costs increase. That 8% is also compounded by the fact that we have what I'll call balloon years. So if you're only resurfacing every 6 years, on that 6th year, your costs really go up. Or for whatever surface we're talking about, the playground, the pickleball, or the parking lot. And so just to kind of give you a visual representation of what this looks like. So this would be the first year, right? A little above $43,000. And then, in a few years when we do our initial resurfacing, costs dramatically jump up. If you look over the lifespan, that's what I'm saying, this is about an 8% per year over the lifespan. But you have certain balloon years where when you're doing the resurfacing that the costs are dramatically higher than a normal year.
Erin?
Tim?
Why did you, is there an allotment for playground replacement at 20 years if many of the components have a lifetime warranty?
Some of the components do, but not, I wish Josh was here. The moving components do not have a lifetime warranty. When you're talking about lifetime warranty, it's like the bars that hold the moving components. So I'm making an assumption here, and that's actually not even projected in the graph, because at that point, a $2 million playground, I'm estimating now costs you $3.2 million to replace at that point. And I don't think that we're really in a position to make that decision at this point, that we are going to have to replace it in 20 years. It was just, most, like you said, most warranties go, movable parts on playground warranties expire after 10 years. And at some point, manufacturers stop making parts as well. So even if it's under warranty, if they don't make it anymore, we're in trouble.
Out of curiosity, does anyone know, Novell put a big park in Pleasant Grove, and it lasted, they had to rip it all, didn't they change it all up here just recently? Yeah. How long was that? 25 years?
It was pretty close to 25. Yeah. Discovery Park.
Does anyone know if there an additional cost if an extended warranty is available?
I have no idea. We can ask that of the vendors
we
that
can do
we're deciding.
Like a cost benefit analysis. Because if it costs an additional 10%, but it potentially could save us 50%, then maybe it'll be worth it.
Right.
So I know we offer that at my work for 6% more, and it's like, wow, that's kind of a no-brainer to pay the extra 6%.
Right, if it saves you over the life.
To double the warranty. So, okay, thanks.
What was I? Oh.
So we start at $43,000 for 2 years.
And then essentially, yes, you have different balloon years. So as staff and I were as Tyler and I were talking through this, what's the best way to do this? And so use the general fund to pay for those O&M costs, right? The grass, the maintenance, that kind of a thing. But then you also allocate some money from the general fund to the Parks Capital Fund for Mountain Ridge Park. So that you can start building up that reserve, so when you get to those expensive years, you have some money allocated aside for that. And so we'd go through, once everything is finalized, what we're putting in the park, we'd go through more extensive analysis to match, to get our maintenance numbers as accurate as we can be, and put that in next year's fiscal year 24's budget.
Or we start having a lot of food trucks out there, we charge a fee and...
Yes.
Food trucks out there, rent
tournaments,
out the baseball field,
right?
tournaments.
Renting what we can. I think those are all of the agenda items for tonight, other than a closed session. So, is there anything else council wants Mayor bring up before then? I think.
Oh, is there any other questions you have here on the park? Okay, well, thank you. If there's nothing else, I think we're ready to go into closed session, so we need a motion to go into closed session to discuss intimate litigation pertaining, was it just intimate litigation?
So moved.
Yes, but we're going to say you said imminent, not intimate.
Is that
I don't do family law.
Why are you looking at me? It's not the I just want to, Rob's like, did I say something wrong?
it caught me very off guard.
Imminent.
Got moved. Did somebody second? Sorry.
Tim Ball, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, now we're going to go back into that.